Hello and welcome back to Metamorphic Side Productions. I am your ministry leader and host, Hannah, and this is Coffee, Horror Movies, and Jesus. I can't remember exactly the title I gave it or the order. I'm so sorry. Here, I'm going to I'll put the title like boom, like right there. That this is the series. This is the series I'm doing on my channel where I talk about horror films from a Christian perspective. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're talking about scary movies and also Jesus at the same time. Let's go. If you're new to my channel, this is the first video you've ever seen. I'm Hannah and I'm the leader of Metamorphic Side Productions, which is a Christian film ministry where I both talk and analyze and discuss the art of film through a Christian perspective, and I'm also a filmmaker. Our mission statement is to share the truth and beauty of the gospel through the art of film, and that's any film, including horror movies. So I started this series on my channel because I made a video about The Exorcist like 3 years ago, and it did really well, and I just realized that there was a lot of interest in something like this, and so I decided to make this series where I find horror films that I think are worthy of discussion from a Christian lens, from a Christian perspective. I always use lens. I guess it's like the filmmaker in me, a lens to look at it, but like from a Christian theological perspective. The film on the docket today is probably the most perfect candidate for this series on my channel. It's the 2024 A24 movie Heretic, starring Hugh Grant, Sophie Thatcher, and Chloe East. I think I got all those names correct. Literally, this movie came out last year. We're halfway through 2025 right now. This movie came out last year. I saw it and I was like, yeah, this is the perfect candidate. I have so much to talk about when it comes to this movie. And I really did have a lot to talk about because it took me months I just spit everywhere. It took me months to go through this film scene by scene and break it all down. This film touches on like a lot of things like Christian apologetics, just normal apologetics for other religions as well. It talks about like cults. It talks about brainwashing. It talks about the certainty and uncertainty of belief and blind faith, and is faith blind? It goes through so much. And so I literally spent so much time just breaking this movie down. And so big fat spoiler warning, we're going through the entire film and you will know what happens in this movie by the time you watch. You will know what happens in this movie by the end of the video. So if you don't want anything spoiled for you, go watch it right now. Right now, I believe it's on HBO Max. Watch the movie first. Always watch the movie. Don't substitute a video talking about a movie for the experience of watching a movie. But we're going through everything, so buckle up. So I added the coffee part in the title of the series because my idea was that I would always have a coffee drink with me, and I would tell you like what's in my cup. And so I have this cup that my husband got from his last work trip, and has iced coffee in it that I made myself. So it's literally it's widowy iced great value coffee concentrate, vanilla silk, oat creamer, and some sugar-free lavender syrup. So that's what's in my cup. This is the coffee for the coffee part of the series today. And I also have an itty bitty mini blueberry pie. And you're probably wondering, that's random, but if you've seen the movie, you know it's not. If you haven't seen the movie, it'll all make sense in a minute because it isn't random. It's actually very on point for the movie that we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to jump right in because I kid you not, this is going to take me all day to film. I'm not kidding, guys. So a little spiel at the beginning I do of all of these videos because a lot of different folks are probably going to come in. People with different tolerance levels and different histories and experiences with horror films. So I always tell you like the rating of the film, and I'll tell you like where it lands on like the scary level to me. Like if this movie would really scare you, if you're sensitive, and things like that. And I'd also tell you like, hey, it has things like a lot of violence or maybe graphic imagery, sexual imagery in it or something like that. I do that because I want to be completely transparent and honest with you and always have you be well informed of what you're watching and what you're consuming. And like I always say, know your own limits, use discernment with yourself. There's no shame in being like, this movie might be too scary or it's too triggering for me. So I'm going to go and always do this part of the video first. So Heretic is rated R, which I was really surprised to find that out. I thought it was going to be PG-13 because it really isn't that scary to me. It has some moments of violence. There's like one moment that's like, it's a little cringy. And when I say cringy, I don't mean like cringy. I mean like, ooh, I don't want to imagine that happening. But it's not like Final Destination bad for sure. There isn't like explicit thing like there's not there. I don't think there's any. No, there's no explicit nudity. There's no graphic like anything sexual. There are sexual themes we'll talk about, but they're not like in your face nudity, something like that. And then there is scenes of like blood and violence, but they are not like, Quentin Tarantino level or like the one remake of from 2013 of Evil Dead that I showed my roommates in college and they were like, Hannah, that was an actually very scary movie and I don't want to watch that again. It's nothing like that. I really I genuinely thought when I looked it up it was going to be PG-13. I was really shocked I got an R rating. I don't even think it has strong language in it. Not that I can remember. So yeah, I would actually consider this movie. It is a horror film, but it's more of like a thriller. It's more of like a psychological thriller. And so if you are into those types of films where it's like, will or won't they make it out alive? What's the villain's next move? Are they going to figure out how to get away from him? Then this would be a movie you would enjoy. I would say it's a low on the scare level. Yeah, I would let my husband, he doesn't like to watch very gory or scary movies. And I would be like, he would be fine watching this. So that's what I would say about Heretic. But yeah, like, so with Hereditary, which is the first one I did in the series, I was very cautious in being like, just know that the subject matter can be triggering, know that it is about something very dark. And it is scary. It is a very scary movie. So I always wanted to put that out. But with Heretic, it's like, this is more of like a psychological thriller. So I literally looked up the trigger warnings and it just said mild bad language and like strong sex references. So they do talk about it, they reference it, but it's not explicit. Okay, sorry about that. We had to fix the SD card. I just realized that my audio SD card might also get full, so I might have to stop recording again. That's basically what I mean is like, just know your own limits, use discernment, be careful about what you watch. And if you are someone who has experienced maybe like religious trauma or maybe just abuse in general, if you're sensitive to themes like that, this might not be the movie for you. Back to the movie. So the film Heretic was written and directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods. They said they wanted to write a film that was about the different questions they had about people who have religious beliefs and how those beliefs cause them to live their lives, or not just live their lives, but make maybe radical decisions. Supposedly, one of the writers or directors has family members who are in the LDS Church, the Church of Latter-day Saints or Mormonism. And they took a lot of inspiration from those family members and seeing how, they have these radical beliefs that are seen as different, but that they're also, they live as normal people. And then also they were very interested in like maybe exploring like cults. They do mention that the villain is inspired by some cult leaders, but we're going to get into all that. We're going to break it all down. It's all in the script that I wrote. These two writer-directors also worked on A Quiet Place, so that's where you might know them from. They said they wanted to explore things like the concept of certainty in religious beliefs, but also going through loss and grief and questions about the afterlife, which is a big theme in the film. They had questions, and so they kind of wrote those questions within a film. The movie is really more about questions than it is about answers. Another thing we're going to get into as we go through. By the way, recently we're having a heat wave in North Carolina, and I had to turn the fan off because of the sound of the audio. So it's hot. Yeah, so here, some of the reasons they said they wrote the script for this movie, the directors, themes: personal grief and loss, fear of the unknown, challenging religious institutions, subjectivity of truth, big one. Okay, so those are the people that made the film. It's kind of why they made the film. And then let's talk about who's in the film, because this is more of a chamber piece. The three main players are Sophie Thatcher, Chloe East, who are the two young actresses who play the Mormon missionaries who come to the house of Mr. Reed, who is played by Hugh Grant. The casting of Hugh Grant in this villainous role is a cast against type, and I can see why they did that. He does the job beautifully, and he does it in a way that just perfectly works for what they were going for. So I'm not very familiar with Hugh Grant's work. I know he is mostly known for being a leading man in romantic comedies, and so my husband and I sat down and watched Music and Lyrics to just get a feel for the type of movies he normally is seen in. And hey, I am so happy to report that Music and Lyrics is not a cheating fantasy. Like so many other romantic movies that I've seen, it's actually just about two people who genuinely fall in love, and they're not in prior relationships, and they don't cheat on those prior relationships. It can be done. Music and Lyrics, we actually really enjoyed it. It was a very sweet movie. And it gave me a good baseline to be like, okay, this is what Hugh Grant's known for. This is how it compares to the role he's in now in this movie. And he does a fantastic job. Like, I love seeing actors flex their muscles and do something that is against the grain for them. It's really nice to see an actor explore the craft that way and how they would approach a role that normally, they wouldn't maybe be offered. And also like the way they cast it. And then we'll talk about how his performance actually isn't very different from what he does before, but it works so exceptionally well for the character that he's playing. And I completely understand why they cast him in the role. And the other two actresses, so Sophie Thatcher, she's kind of a hot name right now. She's up and coming. Maybe she's not up and coming. Maybe she's already there. But she was in this movie Companion, which I really want to see. I didn't get to see it in theaters, with Jack Quaid, who I always jokingly say goes on my Hear Me Out cake. My husband doesn't understand that one. But I really wanted to see it because I was like, oh, seems like a crazy movie. I love twisty movies like that. And she's in so many other things I can't think of right now, but I just know that when I saw her listed, I was like, oh yeah, Sophie Thatcher, she's like someone she's going to be, big. And I want to say Chloe East, also great actress. She plays a phenomenal role in this film. She worked with Steven Spielberg already at some point. She is great. Actually, she's a great final girl. She is technically the final girl of this film. A little spoiler warning for everything. And I'm actually wearing my final girl shirt. And technically, Chloe East plays the final girl of this film. And so both of these actresses did amazing jobs. I was so impressed. But yeah, the cast was phenomenal. They carried it exceptionally well. When you have a chamber piece like this, you have to have a strong cast. You have to have strong performers who know what they're doing. And they did. They carried it beautifully. And so that is why it is one of the crucial parts, one of the crucial reasons why a film like this works, is because the actors were there to bring what they needed to bring. And a lot of times, I remember in directing class when I was in film school, they talked about that like 2/3 of good directing is actually your actors. It's not really you. It's your performer. Like if your performer gets it, your job is like halfway done. And that's what makes movies magical, when humans come together creatively for a common creative goal, and they add what they do to it, and they make these characters and stories come alive. Okay, off my soapbox now. Let's continue on. I gotta start eating this pie because I'm afraid, I don't want to have it sit out. So why Mormonism as the main religious lens of the film? I think that's because it is like the framing religion of the movie. So I think the obvious answer is that the writer-directors had family members who were in the LDS church.
Look, the pie!
And so they talked to their family members about their experience, their personal beliefs, and things like that. And then also, both Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East were raised in the LDS church, which I found very surprising, but also very smart to cast them in these roles, because kind of like with writing, you write what you know, you write best about what you personally know. Same thing with acting. They were able to bring a lot of authenticity, their own personal experiences into these roles, which always makes it better for acting. It's a lot of different acting methods use personal experience to make acting more believable or more authentic. There's another reason why Mormonism kind of works as the main religion here. And I have no idea if this was intentional on the writer-director's part, but a big part of Mormonism is the burning in your bosom or the feeling it in your heart aspect. So now remember, Mormonism is one of the more recent religions. It is American, actually. It was founded in America by an American, Joseph Smith. When Mormons are, I can't remember exactly, but if they have a question or a doubt, or maybe it's actually maybe like a confirmation. So in Christianity, you have things like catechism, where you learn different truths. You know, they'll say like, what is the purpose of man? The purpose of man is to, or what's the purpose of life? The purpose of life is to know God and love and enjoy him forever. Westminster Catechism. I might have botched that, but you will, as a kid, go through that in church. And then if you get to a certain age, you can be confirmed, which is like when you're like confirmed as like a member of the church. Catholics and Protestants differ about what that exactly means and like what, how you approach that. But it's basically this moment where you're like, do you believe in Christ? And you say, yes, I believe. That's supposed to be based upon the truths of the gospel that you have been taught and learned, and also your personal belief. And so in Mormonism, I don't know if this is an actual time like in Christian churches, but it's called the burning in the bosom, where you are asked, or you think about the scriptures of Mormonism, the Book of Mormon, and you say, oh, I feel a burning in my chest, and that confirms that I believe it. And so in a lot of ways, LDS Mormonism is very feelings-based in how they go about with their faith. To have a significant part of it be feelings-based, that burning in your bosom to confirm if it's true or not, it does fit very well into this film. I don't know if they did that on purpose, or it's just because Beck and Woods had family members that were in the Mormon church, and so they saw that and were like, well, this is what we know and we'll write about that. But it is kind of conveniently, it kind of fits well. This is the first part of this video that might be a little controversial, but let me take another pie bite here. Mormons and Christians are different. The things that are fundamental and non-negotiable cornerstones of each of our faiths, the different faiths, they aren't the same. They differ. And because they differ, we're different. I'm going to explain it, okay? But a lot of Mormons view themselves as Christian, but a lot of Christians don't view Mormons as Christian for these reasons, and I will explain. Actually, I wrote it down. I'm going to read it out because this is important. I want to make sure that I get this right. Christians believe that Jesus is fully God and fully man in the second person of the Trinity. He has always existed as God and is co-equal and co-eternal with his Father. Mormons believe that Jesus is the literal Spirit of God, the Father, and is a separate being from him. Before he was born on earth, in their theology, he existed as Jehovah in a pre-mortal spirit world. He's also seen as the elder brother of all human spirits, including Lucifer before his rebellion, which means they believe that Jesus is the brother of Satan. So they interpret a verse like Colossians 1:15 in a completely different way than a Christian does. Christians believe in the traditional doctrine of the Trinity. God, the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Spirit are three persons that are in one divine essence. They are three in one. They are all one God. This is essential to the gospel because Christ has to be God in order to fully take on God's wrath in order to fulfill the sin debt of humanity. But he also has to be fully man in order for his payment to apply to man. Mormons reject the traditional Trinity. Instead, they believe that the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost are three distinct beings with unity of purpose, but not a substance. They are three separate beings that are not one God. Because they don't believe Christ is fully God, it changes the gospel message significantly at its core, which is, we're going to get into it, but literally Mormons believe a Christian heresy. We're going to get into that later as to why exactly that is a heresy according to Christian belief in the gospel. It is a core thing that differentiates us. Just know that. Christians believe that after Christ's resurrection, he ascended into heaven and he will return for a second coming. Mormons also believe that Jesus will have a second coming. Before he ascended, he visited the Americas and taught the Nephites, as reported in the Book of Mormon in his teachings. So Jesus, before he ascended, after he resurrected, but before he ascended, came to America and talk to the Nephites. Who are the Nephites? That's a lot of lore. I accidentally stumbled onto a secret American history and Mormon theology when I was writing this, and I almost went down a rabbit hole with who are the Nephites. I don't have time to unpack all of it. Sorry, guys, we can't go down that rabbit hole here. There's actually a lot that Mormons believe that are extra biblical that I can't get into right now. The important thing to take away from this is that Mormons and Christians aren't the same. We believe completely different things about basic cornerstone theology and doctrine, and that separates us as religions. It's a very common belief by Mormons that because they claim to be followers of Christ, that they are also Christian, but they reject basic fundamental beliefs about Christ that radically change the theology of who Christ is. And remember, Christianity is about who Christ is. If you change that definition, then it's no longer Christ. If you add or take away anything from the gospel, then it is no longer the gospel. So I'm just going to let that, sit there. About to get into the whole movie now. And that's the longest part. We're going to break this down scene by scene, not frame by frame like Novum does. By the way, after I did Heretic, why is there both A24 movies that start with H-E-R? H-E-R-E, actually. When I did Hereditary, I did it, I filmed it, I researched it, and then I found Novum's video about it. 4 hours? 4 hours? I think he has one that's like 9 hours long. Couldn't be me, but oh my gosh, I wish I'd seen that before because it would have helped me out. But yeah, like go watch that just because he did it. Just because he sat down and made a 4-hour video. Goodness. But that's not going to be me. Hopefully not. It's not going to be 4 hours by the time I'm done with this. But we are going to be thorough. So here we go. Into the fray. We start the film off in this scene with two Mormon missionaries sitting on a bench looking at, I would say, a large mountain, and they're having an interesting discussion, this first scene. And I'm actually going to break that scene down bit by bit. I will have to be referring to my script a lot because I just do so much better when I write things down. So I might have to end up actually reading some of what I wrote so that I can be very clear and concise about what I mean. But the film starts with two young women who are Mormon missionaries on their mission, played by Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East. Sophie Thatcher plays Sister Barnes and Chloe East plays Sister Paxton. So when you first see them, you would probably assume that Paxton is more of the traditional, grew up in the Mormon church, very innocent, very sweet, just by her demeanor and also by how she's dressed. And then Barnes is a little bit more edgy, possibly a little bit more worldly. You might even assume maybe she is thinking of not being in the church anymore. She might be someone who was like, well, maybe I'm just doing this because I was raised in it. And we'll actually find out that for Barnes, that's not necessarily true. But we find out immediately for Paxton that her, I'm such an innocent, I don't know anything, Mormon girl demeanor, not actually what's going on fully. She is very sweet. She's very loving. She's not so innocent as we are immediately shown in the first scene, in the first conversation these two have. So they're on this bench and they are talking about corn. Not corn as in the vegetable you eat, but like the word people use on the internet to substitute another word. Explicit videos that most people watch for free on the internet, and they go to a specific place to watch them. They're talking about that. Now, as someone raised as a good Christian girl who's been in private conversations with other good Christian girls, I get it. We're all girls at the end of the day. We have conversations that are in our girldom, not necessarily about this specifically, but the thing that they kind of start going on about. I get it. But this scene is meant to establish a couple things for these characters and for the rest of the film. And I will say that I'm going to break the opening scene down pretty succinctly, not as much as I will for the rest of the film. But the reason why is because the opening scene of a film is actually extremely important. Where you decide to start your story is very crucial for audiences to be clued in as to what they experience within the rest of your story. So an opening scene for a film is, we should talk about it. So they are in a scenic location. They are sitting on a bench facing a mountain, puts us smack dab in the middle of Utah, which is Mormon country. There is a distant sound of thunder in the background. which is signaling an oncoming storm, which is pretty symbolic, right? And also an important detail for later. I'm going to be saying that a lot. Important detail for later. So Paxton, being, I guess, inspired by the ad that's on the back of this bench that they're sitting on, starts talking about Magnum condoms and how Magnum condoms really aren't bigger. They're just advertised as bigger. She then relates this to the Book of Mormon and how people, by the power of suggestion and marketing, have been told that it isn't true. She says many people might not believe in the Book of Mormon because of the power of marketing and because they were told from a young age that it just simply isn't true, and so they never believe in it. So we've actually already established a main theme in this film from the very first line. Spoken by Sister Paxton. Important. Remember that. The first person to, I think she's the first person to speak is, or at least to say this line, is Sister Paxton. That theme is, how can we know what is true despite all the misconceptions and misleadings around us? Are Magnum condoms really bigger, or are they just a marketing ploy to sell more condoms? Is the Book of Mormon really untrue, or is it simply a misconception that is commonly sold as truth? Paxton goes on to overshare in this scene and says that she saw an explicit video, and in this video, the actors who were in the middle of filming were screamed at by someone to not be so loud or whatnot. So it was like an amateur video, I guess. And she describes seeing this look of shame come over the actors' faces at this interruption in the video. And Paxton said that seeing their shame at being called out for what they were doing, she took that as personal confirmation that God was real, because of the inherent shame that she saw on the actors' faces for engaging in their sexual immorality. I know it's a little uncomfortable to make this juxtaposition, and Sister Barnes agrees with us. She kind of gives her this, and she's like, do you watch that regularly? She goes, oh, no. But keep this in mind for later, that Paxton is the one who makes this whole juxtaposition and talks about this. She is already, in the very first time we meet her, she has told us or shown us that she's not as sinless and straight and narrow as she appears to be. She is still very sensitive and sweet and maybe innocent in many, many ways, but she isn't completely innocent. And I think people need to realize that it was already established in the beginning of the movie, because as we get on later, people, they thought it was unbelievable what happened at the end with her character. I'm just trying to make the point that it was established. I don't want to call her goody two-shoes, but like that's what people were. They just clocked her as that, and then they weren't paying attention. I don't know how, because this is a crazy first scene and first conversation to start on. So in this story, what Paxton is talking about, like that was personal confirmation. I just knew in that moment that like God was real, is an allusion to what I was talking about earlier, which is the burning in the bosom thing in Mormonism. This is referring to a spiritual confirmation, often described as a burning in the bosom or a personal witness from the Holy Ghost, Holy Spirit. Mormons believe that God reveals truth to individuals through feelings of peace, warmth, joy, or clarity. This example in this scene would be clarity. I hope not the other ones. The idea comes from the scriptures, Mormon scriptures from Moroni 10:4-5 in the Book of Mormon, which encourages people to pray and ask God if the teachings are true, promising that the Holy Ghost will confirm it for them. Many Mormons interpret this as an emotional or spiritual feeling that reinforces their beliefs in the church's teachings. So I don't know if Woods or Beck chose Mormonism because of this aspect of it. I already talked about this. It does fit in with this film pretty well, especially when they meet Mr. Reed. But the more I did research, it seems like they just knew a lot of Mormons, and so they decided to use that as the spirit, that they used Mormonism, LDS as the religious framework, spiritual framework of the movie. So, but it is, I just wanted to mention that because they do kind of allude to it here with her story and how she was saying like, oh, I just knew at that moment because of the inherent feeling that I had. So Barnes actually counters Paxton's point a little bit, and she tells a story about her sister who was married to a man who supposedly needed to use Magnum condoms, basically saying with her own personal experience that she sees how the advertising is actually true. Paxton then replies with,
"Sounds made up," which
is her falling into the very trap that she accused other people of falling into. She even begins the whole thing by saying,
"I heard Magnum condoms are basically same size as regular condoms.
She is currently doing the very thing she's arguing against. Her own logic is being counteracted by her in this moment. This is known as the self-contradiction fallacy, also called the inconsistency fallacy, occurs when someone makes an argument that contradicts itself, making it logically incoherent. This can happen in different ways. Contradictory premises, when two claims in the argument cannot both be true at the same time. Example, there's no absolute truth. This statement contradicts itself because if it's true, then it's false. There are other examples. I'm not going to read them, but I will put them up on the screen for you. This fallacy makes an argument self-defeating because it undermines itself by containing conflicting ideas. Also a huge theme of this entire movie, which I will be getting into later. Also, I'm not going to break down all the rest of the movie like this, like I've already said. It's just this opening scene. It was important. There's a couple details here that we really need to establish, which is, Paxton revealing, some personal, questionable for a Mormon girl to do stuff. Also, this conversation of bringing personal experiences and kind of arguing through personal experiences, trying to figure out what's actually true, and then engaging in logical fallacy. All of that is very important. It all happens in one conversation in the first scene, opening scene, and we have the foreshadowing of the thunder of the storm. So keep all that in mind. So before I continue on, I have to read my script because it's better for me to be clear by reading my script. So I'm going to hold it and you're going to see me look off camera. That's what I'm doing. I'm still figuring out this YouTuber thing, guys. I'm still trying to be me in front of the camera. I'm a little bit more confident today, but still but everything I read to you, I wrote. I know I did because I slaved over this. I slaved over this for 3 months. So it is my words. It's easier for me to just read what I have instead of trying to read it and then say it in whatever. I'm going to read it. Okay. So we leave that scene and we see them traveling through the town that they're in. I'm not sure exactly if it's Salt Lake City or where it is in Utah, but basically they have a list of people who said they wanted to learn more about the Mormon church. So they go down that list and they meet with these people in person and they talk to them about their faith. And they are trying to, I think, get people to be baptized. I think that's what Paxton talks about. So this is a classic Mormon mission. Young people do this all the time in the Mormon church. And I can't remember exactly. I know it's a practice of theirs. I don't know if it's something that's required of them or if it's strongly encouraged. But we've all seen the guys with the little white shirts and ties on bikes. They're going around to people who I guess have said at some point who are in contact with the Mormon church that they would be interested in learning more. Or I do know that Mormons also do just knock on your door, cold call you in that way. So, but in this one, they have a list of people that already were interested that they're going to discuss their faith with and give them pamphlets about the church. And I think Paxton says something about wanting to get people baptized. Is that what she says? Basically, Barnes, it is revealed Barnes is more successful at this than Paxton, and Paxton is really wanting to get her first conversion on her mission. While they're out and about, these group of teen girls are taking selfies, and they run up to Paxton and they're like, "Can we take a picture with you?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, let's do that." And Sister Paxton's really excited about this and not wary enough of the danger of teenagers in a group. So she says yes. She thinks this is a moment of human connection, that she's going to take a picture with these random girls who are nice and sweet. If you see a group of teens out and about, in a mall or something, there's a level of fear there. They could be very sweet, wonderful kids, or they completely can wreck you from 10, 15 feet away. Just like the John Mulaney clip where he's they will zero in on exactly what it is that you are insecure about. So these random teen girls are the dangerous kind. And they are taking this picture with her and they say, "Is it true you wear magic underwear?" And she goes, "What?" And she pantses Sister Paxton while they're taking the picture and reveals her undergarments, which are real things the Mormons are supposed to wear. They are these undergarments that I think are made of white cotton. I think they're for sexual purity. I'm not sure. They're supposed to wear them under their clothes at all times. But yeah, despite her being a Mormon, is pantsing sexual assault? I know people do it when they're kids and stuff, but I think I think it's wrong. I think it might be illegal. I need to look into that. As they walk away from that experience, we see Paxton like visibly wiping a tear, because of course she would. It was very mean what they did. They did something very nasty to her and cruel. And she's like obviously having negative feelings about it, because don't do that. Don't do that to people, okay? This might be the beginning of a theme that is being set up later, which is like these girls being taken advantage of because they're out on mission and they're kind of out there by themselves and they don't have like a lot of protection. It's kind of like a soft way of like opening us up to that idea of like there's danger out there. And I don't want people to watch this and be like, haha, well, she was wearing white shorts or whatnot. It's still highly disrespectful, definitely taking advantage of her. And I think this scene was meant for us to make us as the audience feel sympathetic towards her and Barnes, but also make us a little uncomfortable. Also, like I said, kind of softly setting up this idea of people coming on to these women and like having their way with them, because that is something that will come up later, not explicitly so, but like I said, we're going to talk about that aspect of it. But it's kind of like a prep the audience and to be like, let's get in this mind space of like, they're not safe. So they get to the bottom of their list and it is a man. I forget his first name. I don't know if his first name is ever said, but he goes by Mr. Reed. They just call him Mr. Reed. They go to his house and he is like next to last on their list. He's not the very last person. There's like one person below them that they're supposed to go to after they see him. His house is kind of out of the woods. It's out of the way. It has a wrought iron fence around it. So they have bikes and they lock their bikes up on this wrought iron fence that he has with a big red bike lock. Important detail for later. And then they go up to his house. Now, remember I said in the beginning of the movie there was thunder? Well, now it's starting to rain, and it's starting to rain hard. So Mr. Reed answers the door and he's holding a watering can. Important detail for later. The rain is pouring now. They're under his little like porch or whatnot, but they're soaked. They're kind of shivering at his front door, you know. And of course he's like, well, please come in. It's raining. It's horrific outside. Come inside. And they say they can only enter the house if there is a woman present. And he goes, oh yeah. I have a wife. I totally have a wife. She's in here baking a pie. Remember I just ate the pie. She says she's in here baking a pie. We're getting to the blueberry pie part. This is a common rule in religious communities that outsiders don't quite understand. It goes back to the idea of accountability. And there's also this element of safety from temptation, you know, if you're a single woman, a single man, being alone together, or married persons of the opposite gender, to prevent sexual immorality, which is a very big deal in many religious circles, not just Christianity. There's another level there of, you know, decorum, respect, basically. It's very possible that nothing would happen, but because you were alone without accountability, there would be talk. Think about like Jane Austen, where it was like you needed like a chaperone to go with your beau, you know, you needed someone to be accountable. So there is like a fear of like it could come back negatively on your reputation. Many different Christian circles and probably Mormon circles, and I know this is probably true in like Islam as well, they have different interpretations of that, different feelings on it about, you know, being alone with people, not being alone, what's reasonable and things like that. So sexual purity is something that, and speaking from a solely Christian perspective on this, it is for both genders, both male and female. Like they're expected to be sexually pure. And when I say sexually pure, I know people might think of like purity culture. I'm talking like the biblical definition of fleeing from sexual immorality. And that is equally important for both genders in Christianity. But there's another layer here. One that every girl, despite your faith, knows unfortunately too well. If you are a woman who has been raised in this world, you are told many different messages and you have different experiences throughout your life that lead you to be wary of these situations. Now, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not just women who are targeted or preyed upon. This happens to men too. It goes underreported and it's not talked about enough, but both men and women are victims of sexual assault and sexual crimes. Both men and women are kidnapped. Both men and women are taken advantage of. And we often think about it as like women as the victim and men as the perpetrators. But victims are both men and women. And that's important to acknowledge. If I have sons, I'm going to teach them just as much as I would teach my daughters the dangers of strange people, that they need to be cautious as well. Because unfortunately, that's the reality that we live in. They are very aware that they need to be safe. They need to take precaution, not just for their religious beliefs, but their worldly beliefs as well. This layer, not lost on Barnes and Paxton. They understand that it is required by their church. They want to be honorable in their mission to make sure they follow all the rules, but they're also painfully aware that they are smaller and weaker than this man. This man they don't know. He's a stranger. It's not lost on them. And that is a huge layer here that we always need to be cognizant of as they go through the rest of this movie. Their caution with Mr. Reed is not just because of their religious belief. It's also like very real, unfortunate fear of, hey, I'm in a stranger's home and I don't know them, and they're bigger and stronger than me. But Mr. Reed seems nice enough. He lets them know that his wife is home and she's currently in the kitchen baking a pie. He invites them into his living room and says that she'll be joining them shortly. They come in and his house seems very unremarkable. It seems to be the home of a normal middle-aged man and his wife. Mr. Reed brings them sodas, and on a tray is like a little candle. So he has like a little tray and he's like, I'm a nice little man and I have some sodas for you. Before they get started, they ask about their backgrounds. Paxton, born and raised Mormon like we suspected. She's from Ogden, Utah, and Barnes is a convert originally from Philadelphia. Barnes tells him how her and her mother were searching for their faith after her father passed away, which leads Mr. Reed to talk about his own faith journey, a journey to find the one true religion. Important detail for later. He then talks to them about his knowledge of Mormonism, which is much more expansive than they expected. He reveals that he has already read the Book of Mormon, and then he asks, can you tell what kind of pie my wife is baking in the other room in the kitchen? And they smell, they're like, it smells like blueberry pie. And he's like, yeah, exactly, it's blueberry pie. That's why I had the blueberry pie in the beginning. All makes sense now, right? A tense moment happens where he asks Barnes if she has ever experienced any signs from her father who has passed away. It's kind of a random, blunt question, and it takes her off guard for a moment, and she's like, no, I have not seen any signs from my father who's passed away. Mr. Reed seems to take a mental note of her answer here, but he also notices she has like a scar on her inner arm, and he sees that, and he also takes mental note of it too. So he's like, okay, she didn't have any religious experiences or experiences with her father's ghost, I guess, and she has a scar on her arm. You see him like kind of clock it in there and like lock it away. Paxton then makes this comment about when she dies, she wants to come back as a butterfly, and that she will specifically land on the finger of her loved ones so that they know it's her. She won't land on any other part of their hand. She will land on their finger, which is very sweet, right? And very in line with Paxton being this like sweet and kind soul. But that coming back as something after you've passed away is not a Mormon belief. It goes against their teachings of the afterlife. Important, put a pin in that. And then suddenly, the lights switch off. Reed says this is just a quirk at the house. He notices that they haven't drank their sodas yet. He asks if it's because of the caffeine, because Mormons can't drink caffeine. It's part of their dietary restriction. And they said, no, it's just because they're not thirsty. But I'm also willing to bet that the reason why they're not drinking those drinks is because he made those drinks out of sight from them in a different room and then brought them to them. If you're ever in this situation with a fresh stranger, if you don't know them at all, and they offer you a drink and you didn't see them pour it or make it, don't drink it. Don't take drinks or food maybe from strangers like that. And that's from the Book of Girl. Mr. Reed then asks if he can ask an uncomfortable question. The girls and the audience think it's going to be something like maybe the validity of like Joseph Smith or the Golden Tablets or something like that. No, he asked them how these two young women, feel about polygamy. Not what does the Book of Mormon say about polygamy, not what the Church of Latter-day Saints says about polygamy, but how these two young women personally feel about polygamy. Get Chris Hansen on the phone. He starts to twist this question to challenge them on their church and how the church twisted its own divine revelation to better fit within society, which is a valid point. But you already made it creepy. You already started with the creepy. You can't go back to being like, yeah, but like, this is why. I was like, no, you didn't ask about that first. You asked about them and what they felt about it. I saw the difference. He goes on this long diatribe about his concerns with Joseph Smith's intentions with women and using religious revelation as a way to justify his desires. It is something worthy of talking about. I agree. But it's obvious that Mr. Reed, he's maybe showing his hand a little bit right now. He's talking about this issue about polygamy and like women's rights within the LDS church, or maybe just religion in general. And he's kind of trying to dress it up like he's like, I'm just concerned about, the rights of these women or of humanity. But you can tell that there's a darker reason behind it underneath it. That you can tell that he's just trying to like, it's performative what he's doing. There's something there that's not what he's saying. But from here, he then goes into a legitimate question about the inerrancy of Scripture being contested by the errancy of men and that pen that Scripture, the men that write it. God is perfect, but Paul is the chief of all sinners. How do we trust what imperfect Paul writes about his revelations from a perfect God? I will tell you, it is not this answer.
We know it's true because of how it makes us feel.
That's that Mormon like burning in the bosom thing that's coming back into play. But I will concede that this also happens in a lot of evangelical Christian circles. I will tell you that for most of Christian history, the majority of it, the assurance of faith was not built upon feeling, but upon logic, reasoning, philosophy, and argument. That's where things like creeds and catechisms come from. Those basic theological beliefs that came out of logic, reasoning, philosophy, and a lot of people getting together in groups, debating against things like heresy and heretics. Title of the movie dropped. Christianity is really based on not how you feel, but upon the truth of God. And that is a crucial, crucial cornerstone of our faith. Christianity is not a faith of feeling. It is a faith of truth. I know that hasn't been represented well in the last 100 years, especially here in America. But if you look at older Christian traditions, you see how it is more about living your life well despite how you feel and maintaining the truth that is revealed in Scripture despite how it makes you feel. That's part of carrying your cross every day for Christ. That's part of laying your life down. It's not about feelings. It's about coming to the conclusion of Christ being true and then giving your life to him. Hi. Hello. Foreshadowing of the future. I forgot to film this part of the script, but yeah, just to foreshadow, I have to film this video 2 days. So you're seeing a flash forward of Hannah from the future. But yeah, I skipped over this part of the script, but it's really important and I need to film it. So Mr. Reed directs the conversation here to asking about fast food preferences, setting up a type of analogy he will use later when he makes the argument that religion is just different iterations of itself. They make the worst fast food tier list in my opinion, but it ends with them telling Mr. Reed that they don't talk about Taco Bell. Couldn't be me. Taco Bell is at least A tier in my opinion, but it's an important detail for later. We bring the conversation back to religion, claiming that he searched through all the different religious fast foods out there, trying to get as much as he could to satisfy him. And through all of his study, he found the one true religion. So the way that Mr. Reed is talking and looking at them in these scenes, this little interaction is setting alarm bells off in the girls' heads. Would for me as well. I would be creeped out. They asked to physically see his wife in person. Supposedly, she's just standing in the kitchen, holding a freshly baked blueberry pie, just standing there. He obliges and leaves, setting a light timer on the wall. So when you go to a public restroom and they have those cranks, the thing you go on the side of the wall and it starts the lights and it's on a timer. It makes going to the restroom a timed event because you're if I don't get out here soon enough, I'm going to be in darkness. In the public bathroom stall. One of those light switches, he has one of those. Barnes immediately makes an exit plan with Paxton. Very good. They are going to politely say goodbye to this odd man. They're going to back away, back out. But then she sees the extinguished candle on the table, right? He had a candle he brought out with the sodas and he blew it out and went over to find his wife, his blueberry pie wife. And then we see that Barnes, she gets that guttural instinct that something's off, something's wrong. And she reaches out and she takes the candle and she slowly turns it towards her. And the label reads blueberry pie scent. They've been tricked. They've been bamboozled. They've been tricked. They've been bamboozled. The wool's been pulling over their eyes. They need to get out of there because that's not a good sign. Mr. Reed comes back into the room saying that his wife is now ready to meet them in the other room. That's more inside of his house. Barnes plays along with Paxton and they kind of follow him, and then Barnes fakes getting a phone call and she pulls Paxton away and she pretends like she's getting a phone call from one of the sisters back at the church telling them to come back home, because of course she is. She's trying to leave. Basically, Barnes is like, we're doing the Irish goodbye. We're out of here. And Paxton's like, yep, let's do it. They're about to leave out the door when they remember, oh no, our bikes, they are locked outside in the rain. Like it's still pouring rain outside, but they had locked their bikes up with that big red bike lock, and they had coats on, and Barnes had put the key in her coat pocket. And when they came in, Reed took their coats. So they don't have their coats and they don't have the key to unlock their bikes. So that means they're gonna have to walk back to their church in this torrential downpour with no coats and no bikes. And they think about it and they're like, you know what? Worth it. Let's do it. And they go to open the door. It's locked from the outside. All of their worst fears coming true. Also, a quick note about the weather outside. It turned from raining really hard, to being a blizzard, to snow. I got the sense that like the season changed, because it didn't feel like it was almost winter in the beginning of the film. It kind of felt like it was late summer, maybe starting to get a little cold for fall because they had coats on, but it didn't seem like it was winter or near winter in the beginning of the film. Now, I live in North Carolina and I am no stranger to crazy weather. Right now, we're going through a heat wave. We got snow earlier this year. This is just par for the course here for, a random horrific storm to come out of nowhere in the afternoon. But it seemed intentional on the filmmaker's part to kind of play with the weather and at this point. So at the end of the film, I just realized this. We do see that it is snow. So it is snowing. It went from raining to snowing. We have that confirmed. I'm going to guess that if this is manipulation of the seasons on the filmmaker's part, they want us to feel something, they want us to feel something in the change of the weather. So according to Google/Gemini, at some point, Reed says something like, come aboard my ark and take refuge from the storm. And according to like Google or Gemini or whatever, it said that this is representing a self-sacrificial way to salvation, which does not make sense with the story of the ark or the gospel, actually, unless you have to redefine self-sacrificial. Like I was seeing it like you have to sacrifice yourself for salvation, but the whole point of the gospel is that Christ is the ark. Christ sacrificed himself for you so that you didn't have to be sacrificed. But I might be misreading self-sacrificial. But a crucial part of the gospel is that God is doing everything for us, that we can't do anything for ourselves. So if they're implying that like you do something for salvation with this whole like taking refuge on the ark, that's not a part of the Christian faith. Like I said, maybe I'm reading what it meant by self-sacrificial. But so this idea is that there was a storm outside, right? They needed shelter from it. Mr. Reed's house was sheltered. They go in there and now they're literally trapped within the shelter. Like the shelter becomes a prison. Kind of going off of that point, I've read that Mr. Reed's house is supposed to represent organized religion. The storm outside is like the chaos of the world, and you seek shelter within organized religion. You get in there and suddenly you're locked in. You can't escape. You can't go back into the chaos because you're under the control of the organized religion now, which is a big point. Pretty much Reed's point. We're going to get to that. Them being in his house, they come in his house under the pretense of like seeking safety and shelter and peace. And then it's a trap and they get locked in it. So that is the device they're using to kind of show the restriction of organized religion. But we're also going to get into like cult tactics, and this can also be read as like a cult type of thing where like the cult's like, we'll offer you what you've been searching for. We'll offer you peace and connection and community. And then it is a literal trap. So it can also be read that way. This is also just a common device in storytelling, is to give an outside circumstance, creating some type of boundary that characters can't cross for whatever reason, forcing these characters together and forcing them to interact with each other. So it literally could just be that. It could just be like an excuse for them to get into the house. It doesn't have to, the rain doesn't necessarily have to represent anything bigger than that. But I feel like it does, especially since this shift from rain to snow. I've been saying for a while now, it's an important detail for later. I think they wanted snow for a specific reason for the scene at the end of the film. And the ending of the film is very important and it will need its own small section of discussion. We will get there. But to have this weird shift in season, I think the filmmakers are trying to play into a little bit of spiritual ambiguity, which they will do way more obviously later on. But it seems like the sudden blizzard is in like maybe early spring, maybe early fall. It's possibly an act of God, something that goes against natural order because something or someone who has authority over nature is causing that something to occur. I don't know if that's what their intention is. I'm not saying that is what that is, but like it could be what the filmmakers were trying to do. That's my theory as to what they were going for, but I could be wrong. I think it's a good guess to say they wanted it to be snowing for the end of the film, the ending scene. So they've exhausted all other options, trying to lead Mr. Reed's boomer-style living room, and now they have to ask him directly for help. They have to go up and be like, hey, we want to leave. Let us out. Which I think they both know that it's not going to be some misunderstanding. It's not going to be some silly goof. He's like, oh yeah, my front door, it sticks or whatever. They kind of know that, but they have no other option now. As soon as they decide to do this, like a true scary movie, the lights go out. Remember that stupid light timer on the wall? So they go to the light timer switch on the wall and they crank it and it doesn't work. So the two of them make their way further into the dark house because they have nothing else they can do. They come across a terrifying bronze statue in the hallway that reminds me of that giant Jesus statue that's, I think, in like Arizona, that if you stand in a certain place in the church, you can like look into its eyes. I originally thought it was going to be a statue of Plato, like Plato's cave, which makes Mr. Reed come off like an angry internet Redditor atheist, which is not too far of a throw, actually. But I was able to find out that it is actually a statue or a bust of Epicurus. Epicurus also makes sense because he was the one who first put out the philosophical idea of atoms and radical materialism. We were thinking about that in ancient Greece. Crazy. Basically, Epicurus believed that through deleting the threat of final judgment and basing reality solely on the material world, that would give people the freedom to live authentically but not uninhibited. Epicurus actually believed in limiting one's desires to focus on maintaining pleasure and limiting pain. And also, the classic problem of evil is called the Epicurean paradox. It comes from this idea that all pain has no value other than teaching us what to avoid. What is ironic about all this is that while this seems like something Mr. Reed would be all for, that there is no God, or that if there is one, he is a bad God, yada, 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 Mr. Reed doesn't limit his own desires in an Epicurean way, and he does not avoid pain for other people. Also, another note about Epicureanism is that it fails to accurately see and appreciate the human experience through its condemnation of all pain. In reality, there are many painful things humans experience that eventually lead to pleasure or have inherent value within that painful experience. A lot of things that are painful lead to growth and understanding. Epicureanism only focuses on achieving the Epicurean definition of inner peace and leaves out key features of humanity by being too reductionist in its approach to things like suffering, sacrifice, and fear. And finally, it assumes materialism to be true without proving it, making its entire foundation as a philosophy a weak one. Got through all that. Okay. So they get past this creepy statue and they open the door. They believe Mr. Reed is going to be in this room. And he is in there, as well as an entire chapel. My man's has like a primitive Methodist style chapel mixed with like a Catholic priest's office in this room. It's built into the back of his house. We have established that he lives alone, or so we think. The song that's playing in the background, I believe, is the song Just Like a Butterfly That's Caught in the Rain, which seems to be an old jazz song. The picture of a butterfly caught in the rain harkens back to, there's like a moth that is in the, when they're in his living room, this little moth comes and like is on the window and is trying to get out. And then also the theme of the butterfly of Paxton saying she wants to come back as a butterfly. And there's a lot of symbolism of that throughout the film. Hi, I'm Hannah. Just gonna get rid of it. Hi, I'm Hannah, and I do basically Christian film as ministry. So what that means is that I run this YouTube channel and I discuss film from a Christian perspective, as well as use like my education about film theory and film history to have meaningful discussions about the art of film through a Christian lens and talk about how the art of film can, show the truth and the beauty of the gospel. So I don't want to keep you too long, not like I did last time, but if you go and watch the first video in this series, which is the Hereditary video, I do a very long spiel about my ministry and I do my breakdown and everything, but I'm going to keep it short and sweet now. And basically tell you that in this little slot in the video where you would normally find a sponsor, I would not do that. Instead, I'm going to tell you about my ministry and how you can become a supporter of mine to support my Christian ministry. My YouTube channel focuses on film analysis and teaching people film theory, but also through a theological perspective. So basically combining the art of film with worshiping, glorifying God. And so that's one half of my ministry. The other half is filmmaking. Right now I'm working on a stop motion animated feature-length film. Here's some videos / photos of me working on it. And I am at the stage right now where the script is completely done, and I would really, really love to get voice actors to completely record the whole script, have it acted out, and so I could start animating it. Obviously, I'm also building sets and puppets, but I need that. That's the first step to animating the feature-length film. Since I am not a traditional YouTuber where I take on sponsorships or anything like that, I don't turn on the ad revenue for my videos. If I were to reach that, I'm not even at the point where I would receive ad revenue, but if I were to, I wouldn't receive like money from that. Instead, my ministry is supported by people directly, people who see my vision and are like, hey, I want to see more of that. I believe in Hannah's ministry and I believe what God has called her to do, and therefore I'm going to help her out. And so the way that I ask for that help is by going to my Giving Fuel page and signing up. Ideally would be a monthly gift, a recurring monthly gift of $1 to $5 a month, or it could just be a one-time gift. Anything is welcome. But if you become a monthly supporter, then you get on my mailing list and you get my quarterly newsletter, and that gives you a more of an update about what I'm working on with the film, what I'm planning to do with the YouTube channel, and then a personal bit about me and what's going on with my life. So basically, I would continue making these short support raising videos and putting them in my big YouTube videos, telling you about the opportunity to become my supporter until I reach my goal of $3,000 a month. Here on the screen, I'll put down my breakdown, my budget breakdown, where you can see where all that money would go and what I need it for. And it would greatly help the goal of being able to hire voice actors for The Perfect Mirror, which is my stop motion full-length feature film I'm working on currently behind the scenes, but also it's my full-time vocation. I do this full-time. I dedicate my days to making content for people to learn more about God, specifically through film, but it means that people are engaging with the videos and, they're seeking, and maybe they never thought about God in one way or the other, or maybe they really like this film and they find that video and they would never connect Christianity to a film they really, really love, and then they see God in it for the first time, and you never know what God can use to help those people find him. But also, it's just for edification and enlightening all people who are already believers for the church, to give people who are believers more skills in like media literacy and film analysis so that they can find even more of God's beauty within the art of cinema. So if you want to support me so that I can continue the ministry, you can go to my Giving Fuel page, and my ask is signing up between $1 to $5 a month. You can always give more than that if you feel so inclined. Really hope you enjoy the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Say bye. Sorry guys, I had to take a small break from filming because of my card got full, and also I just needed a break, so we're back. So what I was saying about butterflies. Butterflies in this film represent like the essence or spiritual essence of a person. And so butterflies can't fly in the rain because it'll damage their wings. So they have to take shelter from the rain. So these two girls were in the rain. They needed to take shelter. They're now in this place. This song's playing about a butterfly caught in the rain. There was the little moth butterfly trying to get out. It was on the windowsill and there was the rain coming down on the window. So this is idea kind of reaffirming what we went through about the manipulation of the weather and the circumstances leading these two girls, hedging them in, kind of forcing them now into this shelter that is no longer a shelter. It's a prison. We get all the symbolism. So the girls go up to Reed and they're like, hey, we got a call that we need to leave, like right now, we need to go. And Reed's like, oh yeah, sure, okay. They actually they spot their coats on a pew in this little chapel he has, and Reed gets them their coats, lets them get their coats, puts it on. Barnes immediately goes into her pocket to retrieve the key for the bike lock, and it's not there, which is scary and problematic, right? But then Paxton reaches into her coat pocket and the key's there, and they kind of look at each other like, that's weird. And then Paxton's like, forget about it. Maybe we just forgot who put who in which coat pocket. But they have the key to the bike lock now. So they're like, great. we're gonna go. While the scene's happening, there's a leak in his roof that obviously is happening because of the rain outside. And instead of having just like a regular bucket underneath it, he has what I found out is called a deer scarer. I did not know what that was called. I believe in Japanese it's pronounced Shishi Odoshi. I'm not sure if that is correct in pronunciation, but it's known as a deer scarer. Like it scares deer away, kind of like a scarecrow. Now, I am a person who watches and loves anime, and I've watched anime ever since I was a teen. And I've seen these like my entire life. They're like a staple in Japanese sound design. At least in anime they are. They happen all the time. If they're outside, if they're near like a garden, you'll hear that thunk sound. Very unfamiliar with this item. I wasn't sure exactly what it was. I actually found out exactly what it was and what it's used for now. But he has this set up in his chapel to catch this like leak that's happening in his roof. I was wondering if there was like a deeper spiritual meaning for this, because that's such a they call attention to it. It's such an obvious thing in the set design that I'm like, okay, it has to be intentional. So they were originally created to deter deer away from crops, like a scarecrow, but they ended up adopting some spiritual meaning within Shinto and Buddhism, which are the two, I guess, main religions in Japan. I think Buddhism is a main religion. I need to look that up. I can probably put like a pie chart on the screen right now to tell you the truth about what's the main religions in Japan. But I'm going to go with the Buddhist interpretation here, because I think it aligns more with what Mr. Reed and like why he would have one of these things in his house. So the restive sound that the Shishi-Odoshi makes invokes the Buddhist idea of impermanence, basically the idea that nothing is permanent and everything constantly changes. So the bamboo spout doesn't stay in the same position, but changes regularly, reminding the Buddhist of the ebb and flow of a constantly changing existence. Mr. Reed, through his spiritual journey, will reveal to us his disillusionment with the idea of an eternal and unchanging God, therefore the whole impermanence thing. I think that's why they put that here. I don't know who made that decision. It could have been was it the set designer or I can't remember the official title of who would make that creative decision other than the director. Or it might have been even written in the script. I don't know. But it's so odd of a thing to have. And he has it obviously placed to catch a leak in this roof. He knows that this leak will happen when it rains. And he's using this instead of just like a normal bucket. I think they're going with the Buddhist interpretation as to why they have it there. Okay, but back to the girls. They now have 2 out of the 3 things that they need to get the heck out of Dodge. And so right now, all they need is for Mr. Reed to unlock the front door and let them leave. So they ask him for that specifically. He says his front door deadbolts on a timer and it won't unlock until morning. And if they wish to leave, they need to go through the back door, which is actually 2 doors in this weird room they are standing in. Oh no, Barnes pushes him on this. He responds saying they shouldn't need to feel the need to lie about receiving a phone call. So what that means is Barnes kind of like, hey, that's super weird. Why do you have a deadbolt on a timer? And Reed kind of one-ups her and is like, yeah, well, you're lying about getting a phone call because I told you when you came in for the first time that my whole house has metal in the walls and the roof, and you can't receive a phone call here. You shouldn't have any service. So he knows that she lied about receiving a phone call. He then turns and he's like, but I've tried to make it so comfortable for you and have no pressure for you to stay. So you shouldn't have any need to lie. Like he's trying to tell them that they can just leave willingly whenever they want. They're literally locked in, so they can't do that, which important, like I said, important for later. But he's making it sound like they have the choice to leave if they really want to. Finally, they have had enough, and they just straight up ask him, they're like, okay, just bring your wife out. Is she real? Let us see her. And he has this moment. Hugh Grant has this moment in his acting choice that I really enjoy, where he kind of has this like, oh, we're still playing that game? Okay, this is kind of fun. I'll play along. You just see it in his face so clearly that he's like, huh, okay, we're still doing this. Okay, cool. So Hugh Grant in this role, he kind of like wraps this sinister nature of his character. He wraps it up in this signature charm that Hugh Grant has. Like he doesn't quit being Hugh Grant in this role, but it works so very, very well. So if you've ever seen like Hugh Grant in like a romantic comedy or just a romance movie, he has this like very distinct, like gentlemanly British charm where he's kind of a little awkward, and kind of like, he's like, oh, I'm just a very nice British man, but I'm sensitive. And he brings that to a lot of his leading man roles. And he keeps that for a lot of Mr. Reed. Grant bringing his charm and charisma as, you know, this romantic leading man into this evilly motivated character makes him very insidious, and it's so good for the script. And like I said, this is why I see they casted him against type, because they kind of wanted him to bring that type with him, and it's just works so well for what they're going for with Reed, which is like a cult leader in one aspect, but also this like very charming, like, you know, false sense of security that he brings to this man, this character of like, I'm not that dangerous, and it works very well. So Mr. Reed actually deciding halfway out the door just to stop playing. He doesn't want to do this anymore. He decides to become the professor you had in Philosophy 101 and asks them if they really do believe that his wife, though they have evidence to the contrary, they have no evidence that she's real, and they actually have evidence to the contrary that she isn't real. He asks, do you really believe I have a wife at this point? He confesses to Blueberry Pie Gate right now. He lets them know, hey, the charade's up. You're trapped in here with me. Now the cat's totally out of the bag, and we are officially entered into Act 2 of the movie. This is where we see the two main characters, Barnes and Paxton, diverge in their tactics when handling Mr. Reed. And that's important, right? These two characters are going to go in not separate ways, but they're going to use different methods in how they're going to interact with the main villain here. So we're going to talk about that, and that's important to remember for the rest of the film. We see it almost immediately. Barnes is assertive. She asks to borrow his phone, which is met with an assertive no. He gives it right back to her. We see Paxton fawn over Mr. Reed, as in like the fawn response, which is when, so there's a difference between fight, flight, and fawn. I think I have it written down, and we'll get into that. But she immediately starts fawning over Mr. Reed. She's like, oh, you built this beautiful chapel. It's so nice. Asking him if he built it. And Reed responds with his own fake indirect answer of, no, my wife built it. So just not letting them off the hook. He's not playing a game. Well, he is playing a game, but not anymore about this like lie of like, oh, I'm just a nice man that wanted to know about Mormonism. Nope. He's like, I am revealing phase 2 of my plan here. Going back to how Barnes and Paxton respond to Reed, and their two different methods, or two different instinctual responses. Both of these responses are different, but legitimate responses to threat. Barnes fights. She will be the one to lead the challenge against Mr. Reed, and then Paxton fawns. The fawn response is not as well understood by like fight or flight or freezes. The fawn response is when you try to befriend the threat. You try to give them what they want so that they will either let you go, or in this case, buy you enough time to get away. If it's not like, this is a direct threat, like this is like, this person could kill me. If it's like a social type of threatening situation, like you're, you know, talking to someone who's being mean to you, you might fawn over them in order to get them to like you so you can feel safer. It would show up like that in a less like directly threatening way than in this film. Barnes once again takes charge as the fighter. She decides to challenge Reed by looking to the two doors. Or no, she decides to challenge Reed by looking through the two doors. She goes to the two doors to see where they lead. If they lead to where he says that he does. Today he says that these doors lead outside. They don't. They lead to a basement. Yeah, she opens the doors and there's just dark stairs that go down. And then Topher Grace shows up in this very minor role. He's just there. He plays an elder, or I think maybe a pastor. I'm not sure what the LDS call pastors. Here he is looking at that painting of Joseph Smith everyone thinks that Carlisle is based on. He is a clergy person at the church that Paxton and Barnes go to, and he's cleaning up, locking up at the church, and he realizes that Barnes and Paxton haven't signed back in. They never returned and signed back in from their mission that day, and so he starts to go look for them. But we have someone on the outside now looking for them, which is good. So we get back to the three main players. Mr. Reed says, hey, you saw the outside of my house, right? You know it sits on a hill. So if you want to go out the back, You have to go down first. He's trying to use logic and reason here to show how manipulative organized religion can be and yada, yada, yada. He doesn't really know what he's talking about, and he's actually about to prove that fact to us. So hold on. But also this whole gently pushing them further and further to their breaking point and making them more and more desperate is also a cult tactic. It is something cults do to break you and to make you fall in line. He asks if they want some help through this weird test that he is setting up for them. He makes a big show about deciding which door is the best door to go through, the one that will give them the best chance of escape, as you will. He has them come over to another spot in the room. Paxton eyes a random sharp object. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It might be a letter opener. It's a sharp object that she sees. Important detail for later. He brings them back over to another part of the room and he pulls out a copy of the board game Monopoly. He explains that Monopoly is extremely popular, and while he says this, he goes over and puts on The Air That I Breathe by the Hollies. By the way, the Hollies did that song Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, which is an amazing song, top tier song. He goes into a history lesson about the board game of Monopoly and how, for all intents and purposes, Monopoly stole most of, if not all of its intellectual property from an older board game called the Landlord's Game. He says he is talking about iterations, one core thing that is reiterated over time. And then he says,
I'm going to make a very disturbing claim tonight that will make you think. It may even, I'm very sorry, make you want to die.
As if he is not about to make an argument that has already been made many times before, reiterating much, badum-tish, okay? He compares the different iterations of Monopoly to the three big Abrahamic religions, which are Judaism being the original one, and then Christianity and Islam. Cool, fair, we're on the same page here. He points out that the Holly song that just played, he asks about the Holly song that just played, is like, have you ever heard that song before? And they say no. And he says, but you've heard Creep by Radiohead, right? Or possibly Get Free by Lana Del Rey. I've not heard Get Free by Lana Del Rey. I've heard Creep by Radiohead. That's how old I am. The Hollies sued Radiohead for plagiarism, and Radiohead sued Del Rey for plagiarism, all over the same melody rhythm of their respective songs, meaning the three songs are just iterations of the same piece of music. Combine that with the Monopoly analogy, you see the stage he is setting. And honestly, it makes sense with the Abrahamic religions. Christianity is built off of Judaism. We believe that Christ is the Jewish Messiah. When I say we, I mean Christians. That is a huge claim by Christianity that draws a massive rift between Judaism and Christianity. Since literally the time Jesus was walking on the earth, since the beginning of Christianity, it has caused a rift. We have already known as Christians that we were Monopoly and Judaism was the Landlord's Game. We knew that. Islam and Mormonism come later. Islam is started by Muhammad, who claims to be a prophet that was visited by an angel. Muhammad believed it to be Gabriel. And this angel says that he is giving him the real truth about God, which he calls Allah. And this revelation is the final true revelation, meaning that how this revelation reinterprets iterations, both Judaism and Christianity, is actually the real truth, which, to be fair, Christianity also does that with Judaism. Joseph Smith also claimed to be visited by an angel, an angel/resurrected prophet. Mormonism claims to be the true Christian church. They really rewrite Christianity and focus on that aspect of it more than Judaism. They definitely touch on Judaism, but they are mainly concerned with Christianity, the Mormon religion is. There is no strong evidence that Joseph Smith knew much about Islam or Muhammad. He had a vague knowledge of the religion at best, so he doesn't really comment on Islam's interpretation of scripture. But just know that this, wherever I'm going to put it, this screenshot of the board games, it does make sense to what he's saying. They are iterations of the same source material. But I would argue that true Christianity is a way more logical interpretation of Judaism than the other two. And of course I would. I'm a Christian. If you're a Jewish person, you're probably going to be like, of course you'd say that. But my reasoning for saying why Christianity is a more logical interpretation of Judaism than Islam or Mormonism and how they reinterpret the Old Testament is because the founding fathers of our faith were Jewish men who deeply understood their own scripture and religious traditions. I mean, we had St. Paul, and Islam and Mormonism can't claim that. So he asked the question as to why Judaism doesn't have more followers as the other iterations of the other religions, despite being the original. He claims it's because Judaism doesn't evangelize. This is hitting on a theological note about how Israel is supposed to be a light unto the nations. Here are the Old Testament verses somewhere for that. But it is said multiple times in the Old Testament that Israel will continue to not follow God in the way they need to. A faithful remnant will remain, and then God will redeem that remnant, and then they will be a light unto the world, and all nations will be welcomed. For Christian eschatology that is believed to occur in the millennial kingdom, some people have many different interpretations of that, of what that means and when that will come. And there's dispensationalists, which I'm a dispensationalist mostly. And then there's covenantalists. Oh gosh, I can't say that word, but just know that end times things like prophecy that is in the Old Testament, like from Ezekiel and Jeremiah and things like that haven't happened yet. Multiple different interpretations of that exist within Christian theology. But to be fair, much of Jewish interpretation of these scriptures does not lead to evangelism, but instead of being an example of righteous living to inspire others to seek God. In Christianity, there is the Great Commission, which is to go and tell everyone the truth of Christ. Hi, how are you? I'm trying to do that right now. But the Great Commission is just to testify to the truth, defend the truth if needed. And if someone comes to the truth through your testimony, then you disciple them or you continue to teach them how to live in their new faith. It isn't supposed to be people trying to convince others of Christ. A Christian doesn't save anyone. It's an important distinction. That is the work of the Holy Spirit, God alone. It is a call to participate in the work of the Holy Spirit by testifying to the truth in both word and action, which is exactly the Jewish interpretation of simply living righteously and having that speak for itself. So it is true that Judaism really doesn't evangelize in the way we understand it, but Reed is still missing some key points here, and Sister Barnes comes through on that for us. We will see her challenge him and fight that fight response in her in a minute. She will respond. So this is where we see Mr. Reed start to get into some bull. So we're moving on from the monopoly analogy. We're moving on from the three major Abrahamic religions, going into something else. He claims it to be his thesis, if you will, basically claiming that all religions are just reiterations of a deeper, more ancient story. He makes specific claims in this presentation that are just not true. They're not true. He claims that the story of a savior from a virginal birth that can perform miracles was a story that existed for 1,000 years before Christ himself. He gives specific examples, and so to get past this whole thing as efficiently as we can, I'm just going to make a picture, like an info dump here to show you what I'm talking about and what's true and what's not. Okay, got it. Take time to pause, read it all over. So this whole presentation he gives to them is very horrible scholarship. And it makes Mr. Reed seem like he went into the bowels of the internet and found a forum of angry teen atheists and just used that as his source. There's a documentary called Zeitgeist that makes very similar claims, has been widely debunked by many people with actual degrees. This documentary or docuseries, it starts with religion and then goes into 9/11 conspiracies. And I think and then it ends with financial conspiracy theories, I believe, also. So yeah, that's most of what he's talking about is in that documentary, which the guy, he's like, oh, it was an experiment. He said something like that after it was debunked. It was like, this is a social experiment. But you're getting the gist that he's starting to devolve into just straight up nonsense. They really make it seem like Mr. Reed popped that documentary on and pulled up Canva and he was like, these Mormons I plan to trap in my house, this will get them thinking. Now, if Beck and Woods truly put these arguments in here sincerely, they were like, yeah, these are real arguments, then I'm sorry, but you have been grossly misled and you have proven that you did not do adequate research for your screenplay. But I'm going to give them a big but here. I'm willing to extend a hand here to give them the benefit of the doubt. What they might be doing is showing how someone can use lies about a subject that another person doesn't know much about as a form of manipulation, which would fit with their overarching theme of questioning religion and the ideas of certainty. It also fits in with the religious cult aspect of the charismatic leader manipulating truth into what suits that leader's purposes the best. It would serve him well right now to push these false claims onto these young women who he sees as impressionable, given their status as religious and possibly sheltered individuals. While they are trapped and cannot fact check him with the help of Google or ChatGPT, they don't have access to the internet right now. This mirrors a classic strategy of a cult leader called information control, where they separate their followers from outside sources of information. A lot of cults tend to find themselves off grid for a couple of reasons, this being one of them. So to be fair to Beck and Woods, they could totally have done this on purpose to paint Mr. Reed as a manipulator willing to just outright lie in order to gain power in this scene. If they didn't, I would suggest they go with that story instead. because if they honestly thought that these were real arguments, that's kind of embarrassing for them. So get your cover story now ready, guys. You probably knew it was everything I just read was probably your original intention for the scene. Oh yeah, and he mentions Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces book. He brings Star Wars in as a reiteration of this religious story. He is defending Campbell's work with the hero archetype and the hero's journey. He basically indirectly says that all of religion and myth and fictional stories are all iterations of one major overarching story, which Christians would agree with. God has written on the hearts of men his story. It does make sense that man with an innate longing for God would work out that subconscious yearning through storytelling. I don't see it as a like a gotcha moment where you're like, well, all stories are just reiterations of the one same story. And I'm like, okay, well, why is there just the one same story? Why is humanity obsessed with the story of a savior coming to save us? So he takes chalk and writes belief on one of the doors, and that they're to choose to go through, the ones that they both go down to a scary dark somewhere. One of the doors he writes belief, and the other door he writes disbelief.
If God is real and he watches when we masturbate, and he has such a fragile ego that he only helps us when we beg him and shower him with praise, and he hates gay people for being what he made them to be, well, that's terrifying. If there's no God, and we're just horny microscopic ants floating on a rock through space with no divine purpose and no hope to achieve eternal life, well, that's terrifying too.
So both of these statements are straw men. A straw man is when you poorly conceptualize something for the purposes of making it easier to argue against. It is a logical fallacy. Basically, both of these concepts he presents, the one about God and his character and the other talking about humanity as just horny microscopic ants on a floating rock, both are gross oversimplifications of their respective things, which greatly hinders and weakens his argument. But nonetheless, he gives them the choice to now pick which door they will go through, the belief or the disbelief door. Spoiler alert, it doesn't matter what they pick. I think we all kind of know that, and I think they know that too. It doesn't matter what door they pick. He tells them that either it's all true or nothing is true, and tells them to pick the door based on their faith. He states that it is all farce, religion means nothing, you get the gist. Barnes asks him what will happen to them once they step through those doors. He acts like he can't possibly know, and Paxton starts to compliment Mr. Reed on the points he has presented. Once again, she is fawning. She's fawning. She's like, okay, I'm going to agree with him and try to get on his good side so that he doesn't hurt me. So Paxton picks the disbelief door in an attempt to please Mr. Reed, believing that is what he wants them to choose. Barnes, however, chooses the belief door. Now, remember in the beginning when we first meet them, we might be led to assume, upon just meeting them and seeing them, that Barnes would be the one with like a lesser faith or is less impressionable than Paxton, because Paxton was the one that was raised in the religion and was the super goody Mormon girl who was been a Mormon since day one, and Barnes was this convert. But here, Paxton picks the disbelief door and Barnes doubles down on her faith. So just see that we now see kind of where they're really standing when it comes to their faith. That Paxton bends a little bit and Barnes is strong. So Barnes makes an excellent point that it doesn't matter what they choose or what they say, he isn't going to let them go. Yeah. Barnes then starts to push back and challenge Reed. She believes that he has a script he is following, and when they deviate from that script, he gets a little panicked and he has to improvise. Kind of locking in here. She then goes in on him for his previous statements, going back to what he said about Judaism being small in number and practitioners without even acknowledging something like, the Holocaust. Mentions how he breezes past Islam and how they don't even believe in the resurrection, and points out that the many gods with all the similarities actually have more differences between them. Actually, the similarities not so much, as we previously established. That was all bunk. This scene perfectly encapsulates these two women's different responses to danger. Barnes is fight and Paxton is fawn. Barnes calls him out, challenges him, brings forth argument, while Paxton simply tries to appease him. But both have the exact same goal, which is to make it out alive. So just remember that. These girls are scared. They're trying. They're not really caring about debating truth. They're trying to keep their hides in check. They're not actually thinking, he's giving me much to ponder in the matters of faith and belief. They're thinking, get me away from this crazy, scary man. So Barnes convinces Paxton to walk with her through the belief door. I believe Paxton relents on this because she knows it's better for her and Barnes to not be separated on this occasion, that they should stay together. So they go through the belief door, they go down the stairs, and into the third act of the film, I would say. So they get down to the door at the end of the stairs, which is supposed to lead outside, and surprise, it's a dungeon with no way out. Oh, and the other door, the disbelief door, it led right into the same dungeon. There was no point in them making the choice. Paxton and Barnes discuss what he will most likely do in the situation. So they're like, what do we think is Reed's next move here? And it doesn't look too promising for them. They try to get up to this grated opening in the ceiling that seems to have daylight coming through. While they do this, Barnes coaches Paxton on how to challenge Reed, getting her in on the fight response. She ends up knocking down a piece of wood with nails on it. Important detail for later. They're unable to get to the opening that's above them. They hear him coming, so Barnes gives Paxton that sharp object from before. She snagged it while they were upstairs, so the thing that Paxton saw that I thought was maybe a letter opener, they now have it. It's in their possession. Barnes tells her to stab Reed when she says the code phrase magic underwear. I think she gives the reason to Paxton that it has to be Paxton because Reed suspects Barnes too much, like just knows that Barnes is too much of a problem for him, and that he won't suspect it coming or expect it coming from Paxton. So it has to be Paxton who would be the one to stab him with this thing. They hear Mr. Reed coming and they prepare for him, but the door opens and it's not Mr. Reed. It's a dirty, ragged, mysterious figure holding a blueberry pie. When I saw this part, I immediately took it as this being Mr. Reed's wife. And I will defend that interpretation later. But we do see different character details that allude to Mr. Reed viewing himself as a husband of sorts. He has a wedding band and he has not one, but two different cups that say hubby on them. But this mysterious woman comes out from the shadows with a blueberry pie the blueberry pie that's been talked about so much in the beginning of the movie. She puts the pie on the table and does some type of praying position in the corner. Barnes and Paxton hear Creep by Radio, and it's Creep by Radiohead being piped in from somewhere. They are able to deduce that Mr. Reed is not far away and can hear them and possibly see them. Barnes sneaks away trying to figure out if she can get out from either of those doors, the belief or the disbelief door. She looks under one of the doors and sees a box of matches that's far away, but she might be able to get them if she tries to move the rug that they are on. Creep abruptly ends, which sends her back to Paxton's side. We get this little symbolic picture here with the spider and fly imagery. Mr. Reed's voice comes out of the same pipe that the music was coming out of, and he explains to them that the strange pie lady in the corner praying is a prophet of God. He claims that this prophet has shown him a miracle, and he wants to show the miracle to them. He claims that through this miracle, he can prove that all religions are mere echoes of something more ancient and true. He claims that the prophet will eat the pie, which is poisoned, die, and then come back to life, and tell them what she saw on the other side. She eats the pie, face plants right into said pie, and then Barnes and Paxton are asked to confirm that she is indeed dead. They do that, and just at that moment, Eric Foreman shows up at the front door.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, it's a completely different day. That's never happened to me before, where I had to actually stop filming and be like, I'm too tired. I've been filming for hours. I need a break. So yeah, we're back to film the rest of the video, like 3 to 4 days later. Actually, it's June 30th today, which is Sailor Moon's birthday, Usagi Tsukino's birthday. A lot of people online are like celebrating that, so I decided to do a little something. I have earrings on that you can't really see them, but maybe you can. But they are her like pendant, I think from like season 2, maybe. They kind of look like pentagrams, but I mean, I guess technically they are, but it's not. They look witchy. They're not witchy. Ironically, we're going to talk about that. Kind of perfect for the video. We're going to get into that later. Yeah, so it's a little Sailor Moony today, on this later half of the Heretic video that we're filming. So Mr. Reed has to leave to answer the door. The girls desperately, they're screaming. They're like, please, if this guy at the door can hear us. They scream and scream, but they can't be heard. He unlocks the front door, Mr. Reed does, with a special mechanism. So he obviously lied to them before that it couldn't be unlocked. He unlocks it. Of course, he lied to them. He talks to the elder, aka Topher Grace, aka the first Venom character from Sam Raimi, Spider-Man, or Eddie Brock, I think was the character's name. My husband's going to kill me for not remembering. And he says, oh, those girls haven't even been here. They haven't showed up in my house. I haven't seen them. That's what he tells him. He's actually able to get the elder to leave, to go on his way. Meanwhile, the girls are desperately trying to get that box of matches that Barnes saw earlier. They get very close to being found out by Mr. Reed. He walks into the door, and then the elder actually comes back and knocks on the door again. So now Mr. Reed leaves, goes back to the door, and now the girls have a real opportunity to do something because they get these matches. Reed goes back to the door. The elder seems suspicious of him. The girls get the matches and run back to the pipe that Mr. Reed was talking to them through. When they come back downstairs, Paxton notices that the prophet has moved from the original position from when they left her, which is curious. She's like, wait, she was not in the same position before. Remember, Paxton notices this. We see her notice it. It turns out the elder just wanted to give Reed a booklet. So, any opportunity to spread the word of Mormon, I guess. So Reed sends the elder away. He starts to come back. The girls are desperately trying to light these matches and start a fire. They're thinking that if they can start a fire, it will force him to get out of the house, and maybe they can follow him out of the house and get out somewhere. It's going to cause a crisis, and maybe either they are able to follow Reed out of the house, or the fire department will come and they'll be discovered. Paxton glances over to the table where the dead prophet was, and she's not there. They get the match lit, and the prophet is now behind Paxton. She empties all the pie bits, just bleh, and tells them, the conductor says my name, white clouds, not heaven. They unplug my brain. It is not real. Got it? It is not real. Reed comes back and escorts the prophet away. He then comes back. This is kind of a cuckoo bananas part of the movie. He comes back and takes the match from Barnes, who is just trying to light it at this point. Like, just in front of him. She's just trying to light the match. She's so desperate. He gets it to light and says that he knows that one of them is lying, though he knows both of them react to fire. I had no idea where that was going when I first watched it, so if you're lost, it's okay. He kind of explains later, but it's meant to make you go, huh? What? Question mark. Like, I was like, what do you mean everyone reacts to fire? It's fire. He then goes on to ask Paxton and Barnes to describe the miracle they just witnessed. Barnes still fights and challenges him. She's always the fighter, right? Paxton still fawns. Paxton gives in to Reed and tells him what the prophet said, including that she said it wasn't real. He's like, well, you could die and come back. I can kill you temporarily, and then you could come back, and you would know what the prophet saw. Okay, quick note, quick deviation or diversion, or we're going off course. We're going off an exit here. I'm kind of into investigating NDEs, near-death experiences. So my mom passed away in 2022, and I was there with her when she passed away. And that was when I was like, I want to know what I can know about the in-between time between when you pass away, when you're a Christian, and like before the Millennium Kingdom. I have Sailor Moon on the brain. The Millennial Kingdom, or eternity, or the new heaven and new earth, like the part where you're just with Christ after death. Has that been written about? And that kind of led me into looking into near-death experiences. The best book I would recommend for that would be this book, After, by Dr. Bruce Grayson. He is a doctor who had an experience with a patient when he was a young doctor, like just starting out, and led him to do research into near-death experiences, or NDEs. That patient flatlined, was revived. He saw her after she was revived, not before or during. After, he was in a different room while she was dead, like medically dead, and she was able to tell him small, accurate details of things he did in that other room that she was never bodily in, but claimed to spiritually be in that room, floating, looking down on him. Other people have had experiences where they have met Jesus, talked with him, and then returned to their bodies. We did a whole series on our podcast about movies about Christian near-death experiences. If you're interested, we have, I think, 3 podcasts from 3 different movies that go over 3 different people who had near-death experiences and they were Christian. And then there are people who see past loved ones, people who have claimed to have seen hell, and then there are others who have no memory or feel like it was nothing. But I will say that I believe the majority of people who have NDEs describe a complete sense of peace, but also of love. They feel some type of presence that is all-encompassing and all-loving. I believe that the majority reports that of NDEs. But I'm going to have a disclaimer here. Reed's claim of just have an NDE and you'll know the truth, and while it's tempting, I'm going to say it is not reliable enough to know spiritual truth, having an NDE. If we are both body and spirit, our being separated from our bodies would cause some type of disorientation. We would get wobbly, unless sustained properly by a greater spiritual force, which would be God. God allows, as he sees fit, to have people experience different types of NDEs when they occur. Some of these NDEs, especially the ones where people float above their bodies, could be seen as astral projection, which is a practice of some religions and some groups. People have claimed to achieve this state while still alive and not dead. Some even try to do hard drugs to replicate the spiritual state of dying. But the point is, humans are not built to be stomping around up in the upper dimensions of the spiritual realm. The Garden of Eden, was a place where heaven and earth met because Adam and Eve needed the physical to move around alongside the spiritual. God walked with them in the cool of the day. God came down and was a presence in their physical and spiritual world. This is also why God tells us that in eternity, we will have a new earth and new bodies. There's always a physical aspect because we are creatures of both dust and spirit. We come from both the earth and from the breath of God. So, NDEs, while fascinating and can tell us some stuff, they can't be relied on for a full, coherent truth about the afterlife. Also, do not open your mind or spirit up to unseen realms. Bible tip of the day. Don't take, I think it's called DMT. Don't do that. Don't try to astral project. It's dangerous and it can lead you to be taken advantage of by unseen forces, unsafe spirits. There's this Fringe Pop 321 video I saw with this guy named Stephen Bancarz, I think his name. He talks about exactly this, like the experiences he had when he was astral projecting or meditating, or I don't know if it's meditating. He was like entering into like the spiritual realm through his mind. He has these stories where he was like, yeah, he was approached by spirits and, you know, deceived while he was in that world. He's a very fascinating person. So Fringe Pop 321, that is Michael Heiser's YouTube channel. Dr. Michael Heiser, unfortunately isn't here anymore with us. He passed away, but his team still runs his YouTube channel. And there's a backlog of different interviews he did of different people who have different experiences. And I will link that video below if you want even more, like if someone who actually experienced it to tell you more, not just me. I've never had an NDE or done any of that, like that type of stuff of like trying to astral project or something. But the point is, don't do it. God says not to do it for a reason. There are so many forces out there that want to take advantage of you, and they are looking for someone who just doesn't know anything about anything to enter into a realm where they are unprotected. Just don't do it. Okay, back to the movie. Barnes and Paxton in this moment, when he offers to kill them, they see it rightly as a threat. Barnes is even calling him out on his brainwashing techniques, thinking Reed wants to make them believe him killing them is their idea. They have not drank the Kool-Aid yet, so to say. They are still perfectly aware that Reed is crazy and now confirmed murderous. Remember when I said Taco Bell would come back? Well, it's here. Barnes tells Reed this miracle was only a trick because when Barnes was 4 years old, she had an NDE from an E. coli outbreak at a Taco Bell. That's why they don't talk about Taco Bell. Surprisingly, she confirms what the prophet said, that she saw similar things, but she is saying that they were hallucinations brought on by the loss of oxygen or the stopping of the heart, which many believe to be the case with all NDEs. Does it explain how some people accurately know things that happen outside of the room that their bodies are in that they should have no knowledge of knowing? No. It doesn't explain that. It just doesn't. But regardless, Barnes is upsetting Reed right now, which isn't a great idea because you're trapped in his basement and he's crazy. Reed slowly comes to stand facing Barnes while he's rambling some excuse about how memory can't be fully trusted. Paxton takes the opportunity while Reed's back is turned to grab the sharp object from her pocket. Reed says it's not a magic trick. Barnes sees Paxton is ready to strike, so she says, "No, we are talking about magic underwear. You know, the code word that she gave Paxton to stab Reed. This is the moment." But Reed then slices Barnes' throat open. The way it's edited and put into the film, it really did catch me off guard. I was actually not expecting it to happen the first time I watched it. It's very quick. He just gets it. He just cuts her throat. The music goes silent. It's just the sound effect they add of like the shink of the, you know, and it's silent for a couple beats. And then the music comes back when she starts bleeding. Very classic way of making the audience experience shock by giving them a silent beat to process and breathe and experience what just happened. So that silence there is like what the character is experiencing. It's like everything goes silent for them because of the shock. So everything goes silent for the audience as well. They keep the silence for like dialogue and action, but they keep the score while she's bleeding out. They cut back to audio with Paxton and beating on the door because she ran away from Reed up the stairs, and then they do a smash cut to the blizzard happening outside, effectively showing through the use of sound and music and editing that she is truly trapped. No one is hearing her scream. Paxton is now alone with Reed, who is fully escalated into a murderer. We already knew he's a murderer, but he actually did it. He did it. He murdered. I just want to say that like the use of smash cuts, if it's done correctly, is very powerful. I liked how they did it in this scene. Sometimes it's overused, but it was good. Paxton, who has been the fawner, who has come off as the more innocent of the two, she decides now, as Reed is calling to her and trying to convince her that Barnes is going to rise again. Remember, he said that you can just have a near-death experience. That she must challenge Reed as well. Paxton must challenge him. She comes back down to Reed, and now the dead Barnes. Reed waits like 5 seconds, and he's like, well, I guess she's not coming back. Ha ha ha. He then does the grossest thing in this movie. And this is the part that was like, I was talking about earlier where I was like, there's a little bit of gore. This is the part that's, he cuts open her arm and just like, actually at one point he like pulls out her vein. Oh gosh. Eventually he finds a small metal rod in her arm, pulls it out and shows it to Paxton. So most people would rightfully see this and say, oh, that's her IUD implant that he just took out of her arm with a box cutter. And then earlier, remember I said he noticed the scar on her arm? That's what he noticed, was that she'd had an implant and he was taking it out. And okay, so now Reed is going to go full tinfoil hat like crazy with this thing. We're going on a left turn here. He gives Paxton the IUD, the little metal rod, and says, this proves Barn was a bot, an AI android. Paxton fawns still. She asks him to explain. He goes into the butterfly dream, and not the butterfly effect as Paxton, she thought that that's what he meant, but not that, but the butterfly dream. Once again, the symbol of butterflies, the butterfly being the spiritual representation of a person. Don't know who else would use that type of symbol. He goes into the butterfly dream, which is a Taoist parable originally told by, I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly. I think I'm going to have AI do it right now.
Zhuangzi.
In which the philosopher dreamed he was a butterfly. But when he awoke, he didn't know if he was a man dreaming he was a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming he was a man. This concept questions how much of a reality is really just a dreamlike interpretation of reality. And how true is the contained self. Reed is using this to get to the simulation theory. Bro's not beating the Redditor accusations with this one. That weird candle moment earlier, he kind of looked at the flame of the candle and was like, and you notice it. You notice him notice it, and you're like, I don't get that. Basically, he says that fire is difficult to render, and so he notices glitches in flames. I guess. He draws a visual outline on the table there and starts to spin this tale about how nothing is really real, but we are in a simulation. The prophet said nothing was real, right? Yada, yada, yada. He's doing more cult leader things here. Cult leaders will sometimes completely change what they preach in order to maintain the control of that which they desire. And we see that often in real cult leaders and testimonies of the people who followed them. I will say in Grant's performance here, I can tell that Reed is slipping. I don't think killing Barnes was his preferred plan. You can tell he is panicking a little, and you can read that on Hugh Grant's face. He does a really good job of it. So this references that weird comment he made about the fire when he lit the match. Basically that NPCs, he says NPCs, react differently to fire. Barnes was an NPC, according to him, and that's why she didn't come back from the dead. But it'll be different for Paxton. He assures her she can have a successful resurrection because she is a playable character or whatnot. Fortnite Battle Pass. He is banking on Paxton being the more gullible sister here. He has completely changed his tactics here and has added this other layer to it only for control's sake. He wants to get a desired outcome from Paxton, and he's assuming he can manipulate her. But she surprises him. She says, I think this is a birth control implant, which I bet money he thought that she didn't know what that was. I definitely think he was like, she will have no idea what this is. He questions her. Would a good Mormon girl have an implant? Paxton says no, they would be shamed. So she reasons that's why Barnes didn't tell her about it. Paxton tries her hardest here to go against her fawn instinct and to fight. She says she doesn't believe the sim theory. He asks her, but you believe the miracle? And she says no. I think I know how you did it. This is the part that a lot of people thought was unrealistic for Paxton's character. How come all of a sudden this shy little Mormon girlie gets a prefrontal cortex kind of type beat? But if we go back to the first scene of this film, it started with Paxton talking about Magnum condoms and naughty videos. She is not completely innocent and ignorant. It's already been established that Paxton isn't gullible. She clocked the danger of Reed right alongside Barnes. And it was established that after she picked the disbelief door, she actually didn't disbelieve. She was only trying to play the game in hopes of getting out alive. This was after she went through Reed's whole spiel about the Abrahamic religions and that one part that was really dumb. She hasn't been convinced by him, and that hasn't changed. People just see her being, a nice girl, and then they see her fawn response as like a legitimate response to Reed and not what it really is, which is survival, and assume that she is simply going to fold at this moment, which is what Reed is expecting as well. That's why he got rid of Barnes. He saw Barnes as the only real threat, and he thought that by scaring Paxton enough, he could just manipulate her. But we have been shown already that she isn't weak and she isn't easily manipulated. Just remember that. It has been established. So she tells Reed, I think I know how you did the miracle with the prophet. He's like, oh, okay. So you think it was the same as Barnes, that it was a meaningless hallucination of what the prophet saw. And Paxton says, no, I think you switched the bodies. You can tell in Reed's face that he is momentarily impressed, but quickly corrects himself. He asks how there are two bodies. She explains that when they were distracted by the elder at the door earlier, another prophet woman, looking like the first, came in, got rid of the body, and took her place. Remember, Paxton realized that the prophet was posed differently when they returned from the stairs with the matches. She says she believes that the prophecy that she said was actually a script that Reed gave her, the prophet, the thing that she said, which we did see him writing different kinds of notes down earlier. But Paxton believes that the prophet went off of that script by adding, it's not real. Paxton believes it was the prophet trying to warn the girls that the miracle itself wasn't real. This leads to Reed having to course correct, which is where they are now. I can see where some people would think Paxton guessing all of that would be a little unrealistic. That she somehow clocked him and was able to piece all that together with such little information, it's a stretch. I will admit that. I wonder if it is a part of one of the devices of this film, which is narrative ambiguity. We are nearing the end of the film, and the question of what is real versus unreal will start to ramp up. So this might be the beginning of that. It does seem like Paxton was given knowledge which she shouldn't have been able to completely get on her own, like guessing that he had more than one prophet, or that it is not real wasn't always a part of the scripted prophecy. It does seem a little far-fetched that she would guess it all correctly. But he challenges her and says that for all of that to be true, there has to be another way into the basement. He makes a show of it. He taps on the walls and says, oh, well, there's no other doors, right? But Paxton looks up at the grated window that her and Barnes were trying to reach before when they first got in there, and realizes that water is leaking in. If water is leaking in but not filling up the room, there must be drainage. It must be draining somewhere. She moves the table and starts digging through the mud on the dirt floor and finds a door handle. She opens the door and it leads to yet another level of the sick man's torture chamber. You know that TikTok lady who tunneled under the foundations of her home for like funsies, only to rightly be stopped by the city she was living in? Because that was exceptionally dangerous what she was doing. But you know he does not have a permit for all this. The code enforcement office would have a cow. He's like, well, if you want to test your theory, you need to go down there and explore. You got to go physically down there, further into my hellhole. further in my hell house, my hell house LLC. Paxton says that she will because she wants to know the truth. But also, what other choice does she have? She doesn't have one, actually. He cryptically tells her to not go down there unless she's ready to confront the one true religion. and she descends into the final act of the film. She gets down there, and she was right. The first prophet is down there, dead. Reed then closes her in there, because of course he does. Of course it's what happened. She's forced to walk this dark, wet labyrinth. This is the part where I had to really pay attention because a lot of the visual info is given in a very short amount of time. She walks up to the first door and opens it. Inside is a collection of things. The first things I noticed were these mobiles, things that are like they're hanging in the air, kind of like you would see like in an art installation or something. One made out of sticks and the other seemingly made out of stones with runes on them. I'm able to confirm that the runes are Norse runes. According to ChatGPT, these runes say something like, through danger and divine judgment, the self is transformed and protected on a fated spiritual journey, rooted in ancestral law or tradition. This is very appropriate, being the first thing she sees going on this journey. It's very symbolic. Remember when I said that this is part of the film where reality and unreality get blurred? We are starting to get some ambiguity here. Is this really happening, or is this simply happening in Paxton's spirit, or her mind, or maybe just even her brain? Different people with different belief systems will say different things. As she travels through this maze, she is suffering to find truth. Suffering as a means to gain spiritual truth is a concept as old as the fall of man. Transformation as a result of spiritual truth is also an ancient idea. The motif of the butterfly being prevalent in this film reflects that idea. But anyway, the first thing I could pick out in this section were these ruins that basically spell out a message that tells you that as one goes through this hallway, you will be spiritually transformed. Also, the fact that this is the meat, the core of Reed's theory, right? He's saying this is the ancient true religion down here. It's fitting that it's subterranean. It's under his well-built, well-polished house. It's even further down than his original dungeon. It's something you have to really dig deep into to get to. She sees some bones on a table, often used in pagan worship. Everything is grimy and covered in dirt, like it's been unearthed or something buried, right? We just talked about that, unearthing, digging out something that was buried beneath. Then she gets to this door, which I really needed help with. So Reddit didn't have anything to say about it, but while I was researching this, I came across this analysis of this film by this Redditor that pretty much exactly is like what I'm saying. It's my like analysis. I just want to say that I didn't read this until I was already here at this point in my script, that I'm writing this point in my script and I was researching. I spent weeks writing the script, going practically frame by frame over this film. So we both came to very similar conclusions. But I mean, we did watch the same movie. It's not unreasonable for two people to watch the same film and agree on the interpretation of said film. But at this point, I had been slaving over a hot iPad and dedicating a lot of time and energy to this video. I just wanted to make it clear that these are my honest thoughts and words on the film. I am reading it off my script off my iPad right now, but I wrote it. Like, this is me. Just please know that, because it's been months making this video. But this door, I had to use ChatGPT for help again because Reddit didn't have anything. So the 7-pointed star, harmony between the spiritual and the material worlds, initiation, protection, and gateways, a liminal symbol connecting planes. So we have a 7-pointed star on the door. That's what it's generally representing. The eye in the center. The eye suggests themes of surveillance, supernatural insight, or an all-seeing entity, common motifs in horror and esoteric symbolism. Ruins are stylized writing around the circle. While these resemble Norse ruins or an invented magical script, they don't clearly match any real-world language. They seem to be designed to evoke mystery and ancient power rather than directly referencing a specific known language. So the set designer or the art department kind of just made it look spooky. But it does have like some like Norse runes back in there in that like script around the symbol on the door. The circle all the way around is commonly a spiritual boundary. The message or the symbol or the spell you're doing, it's like containing and protecting everything. I also thought that the eye in the center could be a crescent moon, which is sometimes used to evoke the ideas of cycles, transformation, or hidden knowledge. So that does fit. ChatGPT said it was possible that it was two symbols connected and made into one. So the eye and the moon, they were combined to represent both supernatural insight and hidden knowledge. The The whole point is this is a made-up sigil. It's an amalgamation of different pagan and occult symbols Frankenstein together. So if we see this as a creation of reeds, it makes sense that he is trying to evoke this ancient power that he believes exists under the surface of all of these religions represented here. Kind of like throwing spiritual darts at the wall hoping to get a bullseye. That, or he feels entitled to use these symbols of religion in a way to give himself power and control. Him being a cult leader type character, that tracks. Maybe it's both, but it's a door that she needs to open to discover more hidden knowledge. The symbol representing vaguely one of hidden knowledge. She opens it and inside are different items. Bones, old books, incense boxes, like someone cleared out the clearance section of an earthbound and dumped it in a wet basement. But in all seriousness, it's like they are portraying the religious refuse of different traditions and practices. That the things she is seeing are just remnants of different rituals, different attempts at reaching spiritual enlightenment, discarded along the way of this pilgrimage. It's like seeing the fallen knights on the way to the dragon, and then she comes to a new door. This door has an inverted pentagram, traditionally meaning the inversion of the natural and spiritual order of things. Meaning when people use this, they are trying to exert their own control over things they weren't given control over by God, like events, nature, or spiritual beings. ChatGPT had an interesting thing to say about the script here, the yellow script around the inverted pentagram. It is again an amalgamation of different kinds of occulty languages, but it does include some symbols from and similar to Enochian language, which I didn't know that was what that was. I didn't know that was a thing, but I recognized Enoch. Hold on to that. Enochian is a mystical and ceremonial language said to have been received by John Dee and Edward Kelly, two 16th century occultists who served in the court of Queen Elizabeth I, so not that long ago. America was being sailed to at this time, Sir Walter Raleigh and all that, so it doesn't look good for the history of the English monarchy, in my personal opinion. They claimed that the language was revealed to them by angels during scrying sessions, using crystals or reflective surfaces to receive messages. That's what a scrying is. So have you ever seen the meme of the wizard pondering the orb? That's where that comes from. That's scrying. They're using crystal balls and reflective surfaces to get this like angelic language, or at least they think that's what they're receiving. Key facts about Enochian: developed between 1581 and 1587 through seances and spiritual communications. Not good. Dee believed Enochian was the original language of the angels and Adam before the fall, used to command angelic beings and access divine knowledge. I'm starting to see why it might be called Enochian. Script and grammar. It has its own alphabet, grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation systems, though it is debated how complete it really is. Use. Still used in some modern ceremonial magic systems, especially with a Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Thelema, which is Aleister Crowley's system. That's not good. That's not good at all. That's bad. Why is it called Enochian? Let's strap in, shall we? So there's an extra biblical text called the Book of Enoch. There are 3 books of Enoch, but only the first one is referenced in the Bible. I think it's referenced in Jude and maybe Peter. Most only consider Enoch, book 1, to be of any real importance in study for this reason. The first book of Enoch tells the story of the Watchers, who are spiritual, angelic beings, and how they gave man special knowledge that made them even more wicked and sinful after the fall. They also sired children with human women, which are then called the Nephilim. This story is referenced in Genesis 6 and is given as the reason for Noah's flood, for their rebellion against God's order. Inverted pentagram, going against God's order. The Watchers are punished by being bound into the earth until the day of judgment. It is important to note here that the Watchers are spiritual beings who don't have bodies, unlike their half-human children, the Nephilim. So Nephilims do have bodies. So when it says they're bound to the earth, they are spiritually bound, but not physically bound. The Nephilim were destroyed bodily by the flood. Their spirits became demons and wander the earth because they have no home. They are abominations that were never meant to exist. So they don't have a home. Hold on to that thought. But also, if you remember the story of Legion, the demons tell Christ they'd rather go into the pigs than go into the abyss. And so it's this idea that these demons are like wandering around. They need like a home or a host. And they'd rather be in a physical host on earth than go into the abyss. This is all referencing all of that. Dee and Kelly discovered this language through scrying. I believe that's how you say it. Scrying, which is a form of divination where you look into a reflective type surface to discover hidden knowledge. God tells us not to do divination because of evil spirits, aka demons, who will use those open doors to try to take advantage of you in some way. They used to be powerful rulers and they desire to have control in some way over humans again. Also, this all started with the Watchers giving humans this knowledge. One of the things the Watchers introduced to mankind that made them more wicked was divination and knowledge of how to contact and semi-maneuver the spiritual realms above them. So, Kelly and Dee use this divination practice, open a door to spiritual forces, and are given a script, a language that they believe is the original language used by Adam before the fall and the language used by angels. They have a vague idea of who Enoch is from things like the Kabbalah, and they connect it to this story by calling it Enochian or angelic script. Words have always had power. You know the saying, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me? Not true. Words have power. Christ literally calls himself the Word, right? He says that through him all things were created and sustained. He is the Word of God. God created through his word, through his speaking life into existence, his command. The fact that it's a language is a little scary to me. What's even more scary to me is all the little details that fit into this story. It makes me inclined to believe that this is semi-real. Let me explain what I mean by semi-real. I truly believe that any type of knowledge that is gained through divination, hidden knowledge, is not accurate nor completely truthful, because the intention of these beings is not to give humans any type of actual power. They don't want that. They don't want to be your friend. I'm going to say that again. They don't want to be your friend. They want you to be gullible. They want a fresh idiot to walk into that tarot reading at the Ren Fair. So the language that was given to Kelly and Dee may be similar or resemble angelic or spiritual language, but it isn't the actual language or not the complete language. The spirits that gave them that knowledge do not want humans in the club. They do not want you VIP access. They want you outside shivering with the bouncer. They don't want to give us actual full revelation because that's not the game they are playing. But the use of these symbols in Heretic in connection with Reed and everything he wants, and when it comes to ultimate spiritual truth, it makes complete sense he would try to use something like Enochian language to gain that truth. He would have been someone who would have greedily taken the knowledge the Watchers had to give. And then he would have become 10 times more wicked. He's already proven to us that he likes being evil, and we will see much more proof of that later on. Actually, not even later on, like very, very soon. Did the production designer responsible for painting this door know all of this, and was it intentional on the filmmaker's part? I hesitate to give them that much credit because I don't think it's that probable. I think they had a vague idea of occultism and wanted to pull from it to add this feeling of ancient religious horror, this foreignness that most people would experience, not knowing what they are seeing. It's also important to point out that, like the door before this is a Frankenstein's monster of different things. They have symbols for like planets on there. They have more Norse ruins mixed in. They probably looked into many different kinds of occult symbolism, had a surface level knowledge of it, and cherry-picked those for what they wanted to use. But the door does have a basic meaning if we look at it through a Google Translate lens, kind of. Obviously, the upside down pentagram means inverted order, like a human trying to gain power over the spiritual. The circle around it being containment of the spiritual powers being summoned or protection for the summoner. Don't know how well that works. The writing is a mix of Enochian and Norse ruins and Theban script, which is like a Latin cipher, most likely developed in the 1500s and was adopted by modern Wicca. I can recognize the signs for Neptune. Neptune in occult practices is considered boundary dissolving, hypnotic, illusion, transcendence, sometimes seen as a portal between physical and spiritual realms. So, taking all that, the pentagram, the circle, the Enochian language, the astrological symbols, this door is meant to evoke a passageway into the higher spiritual realms so that a mortal can enter, a human. It's a human's attempt to connect to the unseen realm or to open communication to the Nephilim, or demons, as I want to emphasize. That's what we call them now, demons. Whatever is beyond this door is man's wickedness corrupted tenfold. Wickedness added to wickedness, evil added to evil. Okay, that's what they're prepping us with this symbol. They're foreshadowing that we're about to see something really messed up. Before I move on, I dropped a lot of theological info bombs with the story of Enoch. If you want to know more about how the story of the Watchers affects how Genesis is read, there's a documentary for free right here on YouTube that goes into the work of the late Dr. Michael Heiser, which I mentioned before. I mentioned his YouTube channel before. Michael Heiser was a huge force in recontextualizing the Old Testament text into the historical landscape that they were first written in. He argues very convincingly that while ancient Israel is indeed monotheistic, that doesn't mean they didn't recognize that the other gods of other nations weren't around, nor did they believe that those other gods weren't real. They did acknowledge that other gods were real. They just believed that their God was the one true God above those gods. The documentary is a great starting point if you want to know more of what I'm talking about. Like I said, it's free to watch and it's right here on YouTube. So it's there. I'll link it below, or you can just Google the title of the documentary. I can put it up on the screen. It should be free to watch. So the first door she went through was like a basic invitation to journey further into the spiritual unknown, but within harmony of the natural order. That door, having the symbol of the 7-pointed star and the crescent moon representing transformation within order, like the cycles of the moon. But it is evident that Reed wasn't satisfied with that. If we see this hallway journey as the journey that Reed went on originally to find the thing that he was looking for, the ultimate true religion, then we are seeing that he went through this first pathway of harmony within nature, within God's created order. He went the traditional path and he said, there's something deeper here. I reject the constraint. I reject what has been given to man to know and control, and I want to go deeper or maybe even higher than that. Now we get to the second door. So keeping in mind that if this is mirroring Reed's own journey that he went through with religion, we get to the second door, and the respect for the natural order is gone. He is seeking power now. He's seeking to have control and power of his own. So she opens this door. And in here is exactly what we would expect. Creepy paintings of demons with faces, places faces shouldn't be, but still obvious depictions of demons, just like we predicted with the door. She comes to stand by these two symbols. The top one seems to be a Vitruvian man type drawing, which according to ChatGPT could be man in harmony with the universe, but over the geometric shape. The geometric shape is over the Vitruvian man. Can evoke binding or invocation or entrapment and sacrifice, like human sacrifice. The bottom symbol seems to be a hexagon with a triangle and diamond shape in the center, which could be seen as balance and harmony and transformation and transcendence, but with a trident figure painted over top with a serpentine-like prongs coming out from the sides, which traditionally evokes demonic influence and authority and hidden knowledge. So literally demonic authority being put over transcendence and transformation. Both of those symbols together have the basic meaning of a person being forced into the authority and domination of an evil figure. So we see Paxton come to stand next to these symbols on the wall, and the next cut is to what she's looking at, which is the next door for her to pass through, which doesn't have a symbol on it, but is instead barred with the red bike lock that she and Barnes used to lock their bikes outside on Reed's fence. Now, if you remember, Barnes and Paxton got their coats back from Reed. Barnes looked for the bike key in her pocket and didn't find it. Instead, it was in Paxton's coat pocket. At the time, they just thought it was Barnes misremembering the details. But now, Paxton comes to a locked door to which she already has the key to the lock. The lock also represents Paxton in a way. This was a personal item of hers that was taken from her and placed by Reed in exactly where he wanted it. It's a metaphor for Paxton now being exactly where Reed wants her to be. She'll actually say this later. She'll mention this. We combine that with the foreshadowing of the mise-en-scène. I just said that, mise-en-scène. We combine that with the foreshadowing of the mise-en-scène up to this point. It preps us to know that whatever is behind this door is Reed's ultimate goal. The real reason he lured Barnes and Paxton into his snare, and the real reason Paxton is standing there now. It has something to do with, one, Reed's desire for power and control over things God has not given him power and control over. And two, it has something to do with Sister Paxton. So she takes the key out of her pocket and unlocks the door. The way she unlocks the door makes me believe that Paxton thinks she has gotten to the end and that she will finally be outside, that she just maybe actually got through all of Reed's tests and reached her goal. But as we established before, no. What's inside is a room full of cages. And in those cages are more prophets or women. Young women he has kidnapped and kept half alive down there. Now there is a lot to say here. The most important point is that this is Reed's true motive. Everything in the film has led us to know that to be the case. Everything that Reed did was to get Paxton, and originally Barnes as well, to this part of his dungeon house. He wanted to capture them and put them in a cage and use them as one of his prophets. And I will argue as one of his wives. There are tiny details planted throughout and all over Reed that suggest he uses these women as his wives. For one, he wears a wedding band. And I know that some people would say, well, that's just like the kayfabe of him having the blueberry pie wife from the beginning. He just had to sell the lie, right? But I think there's more to that. I think there's more to him wearing a wedding ring. He specifically asked Barnes and Paxton how they feel about polygamy. Them personally. Remember, I said that he doesn't ask about the religious views of polygamy or like what the Bible says about polygamy or the Book of Mormon. He asks how they personally feel about polygamy, which I think is a very important detail, especially now that we know what we know here in this room of women trapped. He has multiple cups that say hubby on them, and he still drinks out of one of them after it's revealed that he is not actually married. Also, why is it just young women? It's not, elders, male missionaries down there as well. No, it's just young women. I would say women below the age of like 27, maybe even younger, maybe below the age of 25. So if this is his real goal, it says much about Reed. And it definitely takes away from his credibility for all of the criticisms he had about religion or what he was truly looking after, which was the one true religion. It really just makes him look like a standard captor. I also found out that the FBI sometimes uses the term dungeon keeper, which would make sense here. This obviously plays into the cult aspect because, and we're going to get really into what cults are and what they're not, but cult leaders tend to do exactly this, either physically, like he's doing here, or mentally, which is to trap and use people for carnal desires. It's not blatantly stated that he does that with these women, but all the details lead to that conclusion, and they're pretty loud about it if you really think about it. But even if he isn't, he is still using these women to accomplish his dramatization of religious power, which is cult leader. Cult leaders do that. That is something they always do, which is have their followers acknowledge through either their actions or words, the cult leader's power. The other thing to address here, and this being a secular film, I can't ignore it, is that with this layer they're adding in with the caged young women, it's a criticism of either legitimate or perceived misogyny within religion. Literally, these women are being controlled by a religious system. Granted, it's a religious system that Reed, a heretic and a cult leader, created, but they're still being abused within a religious system. The world looks at things like sexual purity, monogamy, modesty as means of controlling women's sexuality. There's much more nuance and hermeneutics that go into studying the Bible on the issue of sexual purity and monogamy and all those things I stated before from a Christian perspective. I will say that the Bible is very clear that sexual purity is for both genders, not just women. Men are expected to wait until marriage. Men are expected to be modest. Men are expected to be respectful of all women. That respect is shaped by the role that woman has in the man's life. So if they are not your wife and they are around your same age, you're expected to treat them as a sister. If they're older than you and not your wife, you're expected to treat them like a mother figure. Even more respect there, like your elders. Men are very much expected to not look upon a woman that is not his wife lustfully. That one's directly from Jesus. And if the woman is your wife, even more respect. Men are expected to treat their wives like their own bodies, to lay their lives down for their wives, which at the time that was written was very countercultural. That part, not the wives submitting to your husbands. The other part of men laying down their lives like Christ laid down his life for the church. That part was countercultural when that was written. I make this point of focusing in on men and what is expected of men because so often, and with this loud megaphone from the world, we hear women are not taken care of within Christianity. They are just controlling women. So what I do know is that Christianity has been horribly misunderstood on this. And I will admit, to go on the other side of this issue, it has not been always practiced well. Everything I just said about everything that's expected from men and women on like sexual purity and respect and love has not been practiced incredibly well or at all in many situations and circumstances in church history. And I can admit to that. And even today, there are people who get it wrong. But that does not change what is written in Scripture, and it does not change what is true. Christians are expected to submit their lives and their bodies for the glory of Christ, regardless of their gender. While the expression may change due to one's gender and what role they enter into is if they're married or not, the principle is the same. So Paxton immediately tries to help the other women trapped, but she can't get them free. Reed enters from another door. So there's more to this godforsaken labyrinth that he has illegally constructed. He asks her, do you know the ultimate religion now? Paxton then starts to explain how she noticed that when Reed came back from putting up their coats when they first came in, that his hair was wet, meaning he had been outside in the storm. That means he moved their bikes at that time, using the key in Sister Barnes' coat pocket. He put the key back in Paxton's coat pocket, a seeming mistake, but was really not a mistake, I think. This part, I'm not sure how much is reality and how much is ambiguous. I told you that as soon as Paxton entered into the second layer of Reed's dungeon, that we had entered into a part of the narrative that is a bit unreliable when it comes to what happens in objective reality, and what is happening mentally and spiritually for both Paxton and Reed. Paxton's journey through that hallway with the different doors was very much a metaphor for her traveling through Reed's religious thoughts or notions, so to speak. Kind of like if you were to use the term pick someone's brain. You are literally picking through their brain, but you are trying to pick through what they think about something. It's like Paxton is traveling through Reed's inner world, but being guided by him, trapped, literally. We can see this as a narrative and visual metaphor for Reed using his cult tactics on Paxton. He is leading Paxton through his own logic and reasoning, trying to get her to land at his conclusion, which is to put the sheet on and get in the cage. That's what he wants. So when she has this seeming moment of like detective genius, it mirrors that moment before of how she figured out the prophet trick. But there's another layer here that I think is also intentional, which is the idea that God is spiritually providing Paxton with clarity and with what to say. This is an actual biblical promise from God. If you are a believer and you find yourself persecuted in any way for the faith, it's a promise given by God that he will supernaturally be with you in those moments to endure until the end. For Paxton, she is in that situation now. She is trapped by a man who is a kidnapper and a murderer, and he is actively trying to challenge her faith in God. I would argue also he's trying to become her God in a way. So these moments of clarity and insight for her could be interpreted as God supplying her with what she needs to persevere. It also calls back to the Mormon belief of spiritual confirmation, which Paxton alluded to her in her weird video story in the first scene of the film. The point is, you can interpret this interaction with Paxton and Reed as one, legitimately happening. Paxton really is that observant and cool under pressure. 2, it's metaphorically happening. Paxton is coming to this conclusion in like a cerebral type space, like she is fighting his brainwashing. 3, Paxton is having a spiritual experience that is allowing her to have this insight. Or 4, it's a mixture of the previous 3. This will actually be a huge point of the entire movie, something we will discuss later, but we do not know at this point what is actually occurring in objective reality right now. And it's going to get even wobblier, even more ambiguous as we move forward, okay? Fair warning. So, was Reed putting the bike key back into the wrong pocket a mistake or not? I can't tell you. The film acts like in that moment that was his full intention, but there are just details that don't fully align with Reed being able to have that much control. So Paxton goes on to say that her finding the bike lock was actually intentional on Reed's part, and that Reed is telling her that she didn't actually choose to be where she's standing. He chose that for her. She says that Reed is telling her that the ultimate religion is control. Side note here, before we dig into that, because that is one of the major messages of the film. We see now why Reed answered the door holding the water can. He uses the watering can to give his cage prophets water in these little bowls. Funny story, back in January, my cat Wally got blocked. Basically what that means is he couldn't go pee because of bladder stones. He had to have surgery because it was life-threatening, and while he was recovering, he had to stay in a kennel, and I used a watering can to give water to our cats. Well, I used the watering can to give water to our cats anyway. But having to fill up his little bowl attached to the side of the kennel, it was not lost on me. I ended up thinking about this scene while I did that. But he's fully recovered now. He used 5 of his 9 lives in one go, but he's fully recovered. The ultimate religion is control. That is the most obvious message given in the film. At least it is a part of the argument made by this film. And I'm going to semi-agree with that sentiment. In our Western modern world, especially in America, the idea of being controlled is more often than not an exceptionally negative one. There are many instances where being under someone's control ends badly for the one being controlled, and I will concede to that. From being governed unfairly, to being raised by a bad parent, to being in an abusive relationship, to simply having a boss you are not very fond of, not having control can be scary and dangerous if the person who does have said control is not a trustworthy or good person. I fully contend to that. I understand that that is reality in many ways, sadly. Most people, when thinking about religion, equate it with control. And I will say the reason for that is because control is a massive part of religion. Control is a part of all religions. Religion exercises control in how one thinks, and from that, how one behaves. Religions have things like creeds and codes and laws, things that govern. Is religion all control? I would argue no. That for people who are truly within religion, whatever religion that is, the other big part of religion is desire. A desire to be close to the object or the center of the religion that you're in. This desire to draw close naturally leads into the control aspect of religion. The person gives up their personal control in order to achieve said closeness. Buddhist monks discipline themselves harshly for the sake of enlightenment. Muslims pray 5 times a day for the sake of Allah. Hindus meditate to form a deeper connection with the divine aspects of their pantheon. And Christians see the cross and then decide to bear their own cross daily for the sake of Christ. Put a little tab here because I'm coming back to it. Humans have an innate desire to be the ones in control of their own lives and circumstances. But here's the rub. We are not in control. No one is in control of their own lives. We have a will that we can enact that affects our lives, but none of us can add a day to our lives. None of us can change the time and place into which we were born. None of us can control whether or not we fall ill or if our loved ones fall ill. We do not possess the control that we so desperately desire. So the question is, why do we have a desire for control in the first place? Just because control can be a bad thing in the wrong context doesn't mean it is an innately bad thing. Control allows humanity to thrive when done correctly. Laws, labor, childcare, human relationships. When put under the right bridle, these are all good things that benefit humanity, not detract from it. Control, when put into the right hands, gives way to growth and freedom, which seems counterintuitive. But anyone who has been a child knows that a good parent is one who parents with discipline and guidance so that when the child grows up, they are no longer enslaved to childish behavior. So how do Christians view control within the context of what is the center of our religion, which is the Trinity, God? Control is a central aspect of the Christian faith. It is something we see as powerful and beautiful when put into the hands of God. The Bible says a lot about the nature of God's control and how that control works. A very important piece of that is that God is both omnipotent over all creation and he's a personal God. Both are equally true of him. This means that he has control by his very existence. He has control of everything, but he also desires to have the trust of his people. And he desires to build that trust as well. The way God does this is by, in a way, humbling himself to meet people where they are within space and time. He does this ultimately within the incarnation of Jesus Christ. God made it so that he experienced what it was like to be human, to experience fear, anxiety, pain, and ultimately death. In this way, God shows us how radically he wishes to gain our trust in him. So much so, he made sure that he could empathize with us. Control also exists within God's own being. He has a relational nature within himself, and we are shown a dynamic of control through Christ's perfect submission within the framework of the Trinity. The Garden of Gethsemane prayer, he says, "Not my will, but yours be done." That is Christ giving up control. Christ perfectly mirrors in that prayer what it means for a Christian to give all control to God. Christ lays down everything for the sake of God's will and is given everything and more in return. Non-Christians like to forget that part, but Christ is literally rewarded for his sacrifice on the cross with the church. The church is Christ's portion. He is rewarded by having us, relationship with us, by having us. We being in relationship with him, being in communion with him, being with him forever, that is his reward for submitting to the Father's will and going to the cross. And, also literally everything else. He's also given that. I digress. But the takeaway, control given to God is the best thing. It is a good thing, and God does not require our submission and trust to be blindly given. He shows humanity time and time again that he is trustworthy. The desire and need for control within all humans affects how people approach religion, and in other cases, how people create or shape religion. Reed here has a hatred and a love for the control that a religion can have over someone. He is more smitten with the idea of being the one in control than he is with bucking control altogether. Remember all we said about the hallway and the symbols on the doors and the yada, yada, yada? We've seen his desire for control, and now it is confirmed by the scene we are in with these trapped women. I also said before that Reed's real desire is to become Paxton's god. He wants to be the one to control her mind, her body, and ultimately her life. Obviously, that is coloring control in a very sinful and degrading and horrific way. But Reed is a heretic. I said the title of the movie. We can all go home, right? I wish. I've been filming this video way too long. Reed being a heretic is a point we will obviously talk about later. The movie is called Heretic, obviously. But he is proving his point in his argument by basically creating a reality where he is correct. He has made a horrific religion that is all about horrific control. His control. Paxton is still trying to reach out and comfort these women in the cages, and Reed goes on to say that all these women he has captured have chosen to be where they are. He says keeping the women cold and hungry makes them easier to control, and it's the same as Mormon missionaries going to Haiti after a hurricane and handing out Books of Mormon because it's easier to control someone who has nothing. Paxton asks, why does he do this? He responds, well, why do you let me? He says it's because Paxton has been trained by the decisions and control of others, and that those in power around her have dictated what she believes. Now pause here. That is true about everything. Everything we learn and are taught comes from a source from outside of ourselves. I do concede that what you are exposed to at early stages of your life have a profound effect on you. But people can and do every day think through their beliefs about the world and make decisions based upon their own logical reasoning and thoughts about beliefs. I was raised in the Christian church and I had questions. Everyone has questions. And I sought answers to those questions. I found multiple kinds of answers to those questions as well. It drew me closer to God. I still to this day have questions. Questions are good. Questioning and having doubts about your faith or just your belief about anything is good if it's met in the right way. God even makes room for that kind of doubt within us. People grow when they wrestle through that doubt. And guess what? Many theologians have wrestled with the same questions. The people who Reed might say have dictated my worldview, well, had the same honest questions that I did. But it's not just religion, it's politics, it's culture, it's history. Some will point out that all of these things are entangled and meshed together, influenced by one another, but they are still things that influence you. You have to sit back and judge all of the input you receive in order to form a belief system. Some people choose not to do that and let themselves be told what and how to believe. But many, including many religious people, do not. Many religious people think very deeply and seriously about their faith and why they believe it. And Paxton is in that camp. As Reed is talking to her about how Paxton's decisions were predictable because of just how good and Mormon she is, he starts touching her affectionately, which just confirms to me that he is like that. Like I said before, the whole hubby thing and the wedding ring, that layer of cultism is in fact there. And that is a part of his intention. He starts to dip even more into that territory by talking about her undergarments. Or, as he then puts it, her magic underwear. Do you see where we're going? That's the code word. Paxton takes the sharp object that she sneakily hid and jabs it right into his throat and runs. And Reed didn't predict that. She runs down the other hallway, the one Reed used to get down there, and finds a ladder that climbs up. We get a very Hereditary inspired shot where we zoom out, or maybe it's technically a dolly. We zoom out from Paxton climbing up this ladder to then see her in Reed's diorama that he has constructed of this whole infrastructure he has built, effectively showing us where she currently is in the hell maze he's created. Now, I mentioned Hereditary because this is another A24 film. And the use of miniature comes back in very much the same way as it was in Hereditary. Reed, like the cult in Hereditary, seeks to control all of those caught in his trap. Just like Hereditary used the symbolism of a dollhouse to explain the puppeteering going on behind the scenes, Heretic uses that symbolism in much the same way right here. I will also say that the symbolism of a labyrinth and the different levels of hell are also used and alluded to. Actually, directly alluded to, we are given a shot of the poster on the wall in Reed's office, and it's the multiple layers of hell in Dante's Inferno. The labyrinth metaphor is also obvious here. She's literally put on a guided path set by Reed, but she also goes on her own spiritual journey while going through this labyrinth, which is a common part of the labyrinth metaphor. She also meets a monster at the center of the labyrinth, which is the scene we just saw of her reaching the room with the prophets and seeing Reed as the horrid monster he truly is, the Minotaur and all that. And now she finds herself back at the beginning, just like a labyrinth that leads you to the center and then back out again. Finds herself back in the wet dungeon level her and Barnes were originally in, where Barnes was killed. Remember that. She sees the ladder she descended before, feels hopeless, turns around, and effectively gets stabbed by Reed. She stumbles back and falls over. He shuts multiple doors before falling over himself, and he asks her to pray. Paxton responds with saying, "Prayer doesn't work." She references a prayer experiment, which I believe is this experiment done in 2006, led by Dr. Herbert Benson, where multiple patients who received coronary bypass surgery were split into different groups. One a control group, one being prayed for and not told about it, and the other being prayed for and told about it. The results were that the prayer didn't have an effect on patient outcomes. But I always have a but on these. By the way that this experiment is set up, the results don't surprise me. Prayer is not functionally used to make things you want to happen. Do prayers get answered? Yes, they do. God tells us that we can ask him for things. But the point of prayer is to be in communion with God. It's not to get him to do things. It is for you, the person praying, to be transformed and aligned with God's will. It is a practice that is done in order to better understand who God is by wrestling with who he is. Like Jacob, literally wrestling with God. In the Lord's Prayer, which is the literal perfect prayer, Christ showed us how to pray in this prayer. It begins with honoring God, hallowed be thy name, submitting to his will, your kingdom come, your will be done. And then it goes into asking, give us this day our daily bread. Daily bread simply means what is needed for that day. God focuses on us in the present moment. He gives us the right amount of grace for the day that we are in. It doesn't go much into bigger asks. Though there is a time and a place for bigger asks in prayer, here in this perfect prayer, the ask is focused on the worshiper being reminded through their ask of daily provision that they are fully reliant on God. It is more about the posturing of the worshiper than the ask, because God already promises to provide us with all that we will need on the day that we need it. So, prayer of petition or supplication is when you make a request of God, I would say outside of the realm of your daily bread. And this prayer is real and it does work, but not every single time. It depends on what you ask for, God's ultimate will, and most importantly, why you asked for it. Example, people pray to win the lottery all the time. Most don't win the lottery because the best thing for those people is to not gamble, but instead to be transformed and repent of that sin and then grow from it. That would be God's desire for all who prayed to win $1 million on a scratch-off. Also, God knows that if those people got what they wanted, they would continue to chase after more of the same, and they would forget about the very God that granted them their wish. But there are times where you pray prayers of petition, asking for something specific, and it's not a sin to ask for it, and God still says no. This happened to Jesus himself. After he prays the Lord's Prayer at Passover, the perfect prayer, Jesus and some of his followers go to the Garden of Gethsemane. This is where Judas will betray Jesus and get him arrested. Jesus, as God, knows that all this will happen. Jesus, as a man, is terrified of what he must go through. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he prays. Christ asks God to make a way where he does not have to go through the suffering of the cross. And God says no. Jesus prayed a prayer petition to God, and God said no. That happens in the Bible. Jesus then responds with, "Not my will, but yours be done." This is where faith comes in. Faith is such a central but poorly understood word in Christianity. Faith is based upon who God is and what God has already done. It is not blind. Christ knows what God's plans are. He knows God is fully capable of bringing those plans to fruition, and so he has faith that God will do just that. In that faith, based upon Christ's personal relationship to the Father, he can respond with, "Your will be done, Father." If Christ is our perfect example of how to be, then his response to God's no is an example unto us of how we should treat prayers of petition. You can come to God with your fear and your concern for your own experience, just like Christ did, and it is not a sin to say, "I don't want to do this, I don't want this to happen," because if Christ is sinless, then it wasn't a sin for him to ask, "May this cup pass from me." But just because your heart is right and the ask is right doesn't mean God won't say no, because the third thing is God's will. What God sees as the best thing to happen. And sometimes that thing is very hard and very scary, but it is the best thing in the end. That might be God taking you home when you are asking to stay, or it could be God telling you to stay longer. God's no is never a bad thing. We are just stuck in our place and time, and we can't see it all right now. We look through a glass darkly, and yet soon we will see face to face. So prayer doesn't fit into the parameters of this experiment that Paxton is referencing. Prayer is based on the personal relationship between the worshiper and God. It's not an action that you can repeatedly do and get the same outcome each time, which is what an experiment is seeking. Just like a child can ask their parent to go to the park every day, the parent won't say yes every single time because there are other factors that play into the answer for each ask. Paxton says something interesting here about how, though prayer doesn't work, it's nice to think of someone other than yourself. She then says, even if it's you, talking about Reed, her captor and a murderer. I mention this because though we just went over that long spiel about what prayer really is, this is a holy value. Prayer is also meant to posture our hearts towards others. Paxton adding that even if it's you line is also exceptionally Christ-like. She is literally going to pray for her enemy. She says this almost defiantly to him as well. Like she is saying, I won't be like you. Even now, I will remain faithful to what I believe is good and true, which is praying for you even though you don't deserve it. Like I said before, this is a part of the discipline of prayer. Praying for others, even people your heart is hard towards, even if you have good reason for that, still praying for them is something that brings you closer to the heart of Christ. Don't mistake what I'm saying as telling you to let bad people in your life continue to be bad to you. Drawing good boundaries and holding them is God honoring for both you and the other party. But praying for that other party privately helps God to soften your heart and to heal it. Paxton deciding to pray for herself and Reed is still an act of defiance against everything Reed tried to force on her. Reed wanted her to completely turn her back on her faith in favor of the faith he was constructing for her. She ran away from that and is still going to pray right now. Reed is a selfish and cruel individual, and Paxton continues to defy him by being the opposite of that in her last moments. There is still beauty in this moment in that way, and it reflects the nature of Christ. So it was a very meaningful moment in the film for me watching it as a believer. Interesting note about Reed in this scene, Hugh Grant said that he filmed 2 different versions of this, one where he was mocking Paxton and one where he was genuinely asking for prayer. In the editing room, these 2 performances were then spliced together into what we see in the film today. This is a unique quality of filmmaking that really pleases me to see and to think about, which is the relationship between the actor and the editor. There's this thing called the Kuleshov effect. It was an experiment where they took a man's face and filmed him in a neutral expression and then spliced that man's expression with different scenes. One was him and a baby laughing, I think. The other was food on a table, and the third was a person in a casket. The examples might not all be correct. I might be wrong in remembering them. But the point of all of this is that when they showed these different vignettes to an audience, the audience projected emotions onto the man's neutral expression. The footage of the man was the same footage each time, but when it was spliced with the baby laughing, the audience read his expression as joyful. With the casket, it was sorrowful. This experiment tells us a couple of things. One, humans can project their own emotions onto neutral expressions. In Japanese theater, they use these masks that can slightly be turned within light to change the perceived expression of the mask, but it's really a lot of work on the audience's part to achieve the effect through the context of the scene. That point leads into the second thing the Kuleshov experiment tells us, and that is how filmic language works. Film as a craft has its own language when it comes to storytelling. We as creatures who can recognize patterns and infer meaning have inadvertently learned this language over time. So in the Kuleshov effect, one of the reasons it works is because the audience assumes that the man is looking at something, and the next thing that it's cut to is some type of object, and that is the object that he is looking at. We connect those 2 shots together. We string them together like a sentence. Sometimes films play with this in order to surprise the audience or to shock the audience. But just like in reading, we look for context clues in order to give a clearer meaning into what is being shown. The man is looking at a laughing baby. He should be happy. Maybe this is the father of the child, and he's looking on the child with love and affection. The man in the Kuleshov effect gives the most basic performance a person can give, and that's just staring into the camera with a blank expression. But through cutting and splicing, an editor can change or affect that performance. Now imagine if an actor is actually giving something, doing something intentional. Because the actor can take multiple takes, the editor can now take all those different choices that the actor has made in their performance and craft a new final performance. That can only happen in this type of media. If you were to go see a live performance, the actor can only do their performance one time and make decisions for that character in that scene once. But in film, you can get a wholly new and nuanced performance with the help of editing. just like in this scene. Reed's first pray sounds genuine, but the next time he speaks, he says, "Pray for us." He gives this look like, well, here we are experiencing death. Isn't this where you should pray? And he continues to swing between what seems to be genuine fear and irreverence in the scene. It leads to, say it with me, ambiguity. Ambiguity as to what Reed is really feeling in this moment and what he truly believes. He also crawls to Paxton and lays his head on her shoulder while she prays for them. It's a moment of human connection, even though Reed has been nothing but a monster this whole time. It shows us that even at the end of it all, Reed is in fact human and still desires human connection deep down. Paxton allows herself to feel empathy for Reed, even at the very end through her prayer. She actually thanks God for the trials she went through in her life. I was trying to find if this was a prayer that was was recited somewhere. I didn't find anything. I didn't know if this was something that was existed in Mormon doxology or liturgy or something. But I didn't find anything. I didn't find that this prayer existed before this film. So this means that Woods and Beck wrote that line in themselves. And it's extremely theologically sound. Now, I'm about to speak from a solely Christian perspective again. Paxton is Mormon. I'm not sure of their theological outlook on what I'm about to speak on through the LDS, but in the Christian perspective, the point of the earthly life of a believer after they are saved by justification is their sanctification. Sanctification is the process of a believer becoming more like Christ. It is a work of God primarily done through the Holy Spirit, which aligns the believer with Christ over time. And a very big part of sanctification are trials. Trials strengthen your faith by refining and maturing it. So if you are about to die and the first thing you pray is, "Thank you for the trials you've given me," that is a huge sign of a mature believer. Someone who understood the assignment, as the meme goes. That's the mark of a believer that understood what their whole earthly life was really about. I don't know if Beck and Woods fully understood that when they wrote that. Maybe they did. They could have. But it's still a moment of truth in this movie, and it's an admirable thing to see from Paxton's character. We are so close to the end, guys. So Reed goes from laying his head on his shoulder to holding the box cutter he stabbed her with, and I believe killed Barnes with, holds it to her throat while she prays. I guess he still wanted to control. He still wanted to make sure she died before him. I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to get her prayer in for him before he murdered again. This decision made by Reed to try to kill Paxton, officially right now, is very hard to read because we have now entered into the most ambiguous part of the film. I said it was going to get even more wobbly, and it is all cattywampus from here on out. We really don't know what is actually happening. So Reed has the box cutter to her throat, and Sister Barnes, who has been dead for at least an hour on the floor, suddenly sits up and grabs that piece of wood with the nails in it that they broke off earlier and sinks it straight into Reed's face, killing him. Was Barnes dead this whole time and she was miraculously brought back to help her friend? Had she been simply dying but not dead but dying on the ground and used the last of her energy at this moment to help Paxton? Did this even happen at all? Or is it all in Paxton's mind? We don't know. This is the mysterious miracle that punctuates this film. If it really did happen, then it's a miracle. More so if Barnes was truly dead and then brought back for a moment. But if she was just dying, most would say that would also be miraculous. It is also a complete foil to the scene of the miracle that Reed faked earlier. Someone really rising again, not to give him more control, but to actually take his control away. It's a moment that judges Reed as the heretic he is. It's like God saying, no, you don't have the last say here. Paxton holds Barnes as she is now fully dead and mourns for her friend. This moment contrasts against the prayer moment that just played out seconds earlier. In the prayer scene, Paxton was deciding to have empathy for Reed, to choose to be the kind of person that she knows God desires her to be, and to allow for the comfort and connection with Reed as they both are dying. Here, with Barnes, there is no choice to be made. It is simply two friends, two sisters who loved one another, being there for each other one last time. Paxton comforts Barnes because she already has a true connection with her. It's a reminder of how beautiful and powerful human connection can be when both people are aligned with truth, and one doesn't have to do more of the heavy lifting, so to say. So Paxton limps her way up the stairs and gets into Reed's office. We see her search through the little diorama Reed made of his labyrinth to find a way out. So she gets out through a tiny window. We see her phone drop out with her. We see the phone. The phone says it still doesn't have service. She stumbles through the woods. The woods are now blanketed in snow from the previous storm. She's still trying to get service on her phone. She falls to her knees and slowly lifts her hand to see a tiny butterfly that has landed on her finger. If you remember, Paxton told us way back when they were first talking with Reed that she would come back after she passed away as a butterfly to her loved ones, making sure to land on their finger so they know it was her. The music swirls beautifully at this moment. It feels like this is a sign, maybe from Barnes or from God, telling Paxton that she made it, or that God is still with her. And then we cut back to her hand, the music abruptly stops, and there is no butterfly. It's gone. Just the wind rustling. Paxton looks confused, a little lost, and then the credits roll. What just happened? The final scene of Paxton in the snow is the most ambiguous in the movie. There are many little details that clue us into the cryptic nature of this scene. Why does Paxton still not have phone service outside of the house? Was the butterfly real? Is Paxton really outside? So I will go over the popular fan theories of this final scene quickly to further explain what I mean and, maybe tell you at the end which one I believe. Fan theory 1, taking the scene at face value. Barnes really killed Reed. She really raised from the dead, came back. Paxton really escaped. Paxton just simply didn't have cell service. The butterfly was real in the sense that it was a sign from either Barnes or God to Paxton. Fan theory 2. It's all in Paxton's head. Paxton actually dies with Reed within his labyrinth. Paxton, as she dies, hallucinates both Barnes killing Reed and her escaping. Her not having any cell service is supposed to mean she's actually still in Reed's house with the metal in the walls and in the roof and all that stuff. She hallucinates the butterfly. Fan theory 3. Paxton is making her way to the afterlife. Paxton still dies inside of Reed's house. The miracle with Barnes could be interpreted as Barnes' spirit coming to help protect and guide Paxton to the good place, meaning Reed isn't going to the same place as Paxton, and Barnes is freeing her from him. Paxton getting out of the house and outside where there is now snow everywhere makes everything white, mimics what the prophet and what Barnes said about what they saw after death. Remember, all of it being white clouds. The butterfly was spiritually real, a symbol to Paxton that her soul has moved on. The film does not subscribe to any of these interpretations officially. And that is the point. We are supposed to not know exactly what happened to Paxton or how the film really ends. And that's it. We did it. We got through the entire movie. We're at the end. Oh my gosh. We did it. I still have stuff to talk about. Section 2. What I think the directors were trying to accomplish. The directors said that they had been working on Heretic for a long while. It was a script they had kept coming back to because for a while they felt like they didn't have enough knowledge to write it properly. I will say in this interview from Fangoria, Woods claims they mostly studied atheist and philosophical sources, and if that is true, then I have to say that they did not do enough or proper enough research. They should have also studied directly the religions that they were having Mr. Reed criticize from those religions' own sources. That is a basic element of rhetoric, which is to fully understand your opponent's beliefs in the context of their point of view before you can effectively argue against it. I'm not saying that the character of Mr. Reed needed to have that, but the filmmakers should have had that basis of knowledge. So if that is true, I would say that the film stands on weak legs. I think that would be objective at that point, from where I'm standing. And I understand that it is a daunting task to research these religions and their own answers to big questions. There's so much to read and to know. But if you were going to talk about it, the Torah, the Old and New Testament, the Quran, you should study those things directly and understand their point of view. And I know that could take a lifetime, but they could have gone to people who have dedicated themselves to studying those religions or have read their sources or talked to them directly to see what they have found as experts in their field. And also, in many cases, as true believers of the respective religions and whatnot. I do know that for Mormonism, they did more of this deeper research because one of the directors, I believe, said that they had many family members in the LDS church, and I found out that both of the lead actresses were raised in the LDS church. During rehearsals, they spent much time diving into what faith meant for them and how they experienced it. That makes sense because Mormonism is the religion which frames the story. It makes sense they would focus on that religion more specifically. It doesn't give them an excuse as to not knowing more about the other religions. But I don't know. Like I said, that's what I saw in that interview. I might be wrong. They might have done way more research than I know. I will say that this part where Reed is just blatantly lying about Jesus being similar to Horus and Vishnu, either the best case scenario that was intentional and it does fall in line with his character of being a manipulator and a gaslighter, or the worst case scenario, which is it is lazy writing and research on the filmmaker's part. So I really hope they cross-referenced and they fact-checked and that it was intentional and not unintentional. They claimed that they wanted to create a film that sparked a dialogue about religion and to critique the concept of certainty. And because of that, they put a lot of ambiguity into the film. Not just ambiguity about religion, but ambiguity about what we actually experience and see happen in the film through the characters' perspectives. In that same Fangoria article, they expressed that the real thing that makes them uneasy when the conversation of religion comes up is someone expressing that they know the real truth with certainty, like an atheist stating they know with certainty that God doesn't exist, or a Christian stating that they know with certainty that God does exist. This reflects a moment in the film where Reed explains that there is fear in both realities. For the atheist, the fear is being utterly alone, and for the Christian, it is being at the mercy of an all-powerful God. I will say that having a fear of God is right and good. I don't mean fear as in respect or awe or reverence, as we've heard from the pulpit many times. I mean fear. The type of fear you would get if you're on a hike and you see in the distance a grizzly bear. The utter understanding that you are outmatched and you could be obliterated by the sheer power that the other party possesses. Because it's true. God is not only the most powerful, he is the most in control. There is no escaping him, there is no bargaining with him, there is no outsmarting him, and there is no overpowering him. The only thing you have left is to trust him. You accept him for what he is, and in that fertile ground, you begin to trust him. Because God is not a grizzly bear. I am currently digressing, but I am trying to talk on this part of Christian faith that many unbelievers and believers don't fully understand. In the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Mr. Beaver tells the Pevensies that Aslan, the king of Narnia, and a lion, is not safe. He is not tame, he is not trained, nor broken by a human hand. But instead of being safe, he is good. Him being good means that even though he is not subject to any outside control or limits, but only to those already present within himself, he will not do evil. He will act in goodness, and goodness comes from him. But the power and the reality of what he is, in this example it's a lion, does not change. Aslan still has the potential to eat Lucy, because she is a little girl and he is a lion. But he doesn't because he's good. This concept is very foreign to fallen humans because it would be foolish for us to put this level of trust in someone based on their goodness, because there is no one who is good, not one. It's understandable for someone like Reed to balk at the notion of God being totally good, especially when you bring in the problem of evil, which is a whole other rabbit hole. We kind of touched on it earlier with Epicurus, but we do not see or experience in humanity or in our other relationships a person who is totally good. And I believe God understands that. He gets that we have trust issues. It's one of the reasons I believe for God's gentleness and long-suffering or patience with people. We see multiple times in the Bible where God reassures his people of his goodness because he understands that the untamable way in which he is God is not comprehensible to us. All of that to say, that long diatribe I just went on is that the true certainty that a true Christian should defend when it comes to God is that God is both real and good. That goodness is not a quality that we get to qualify. That is a cornerstone here. He is not God because he is good. He is good because he is God. He is the benchmark, the yardstick for what is good. Another quote from Lewis from The Problem of Pain: "We want, in fact, not so much a father in heaven as a grandfather in heaven, a senile benevolence who, as they say, like to see young people enjoying themselves. I should very much like to live in a universe which was governed by that sort of God. But since it is abundantly clear that I don't, and since I have reason to believe, nevertheless, that God is love, I conclude that my conception of love needs correction." You can replace love with good in that sentence, and it's the same idea. Hi again, it's day 3 of me filming this video. I am in the shirt that I slept in. I did minimal makeup today, just like eye makeup. My hair is in a clip. I threw it up. I didn't care. We're here, baby. It took me 3 days. 3 days to film this video. But I'm already in too deep, okay? I'm going down with the ship. We're doing it. Also, I'm pretty sure that the lighting that I've chosen, because I've been able to see like the different takes I've taken, that it washes me out and makes me look harsh, and also probably isn't great for like the camera I'm using. But too late on that, okay? The certainty that disturbs Beck and Woods bothers them in more than just this way of, if God is real or not real, then what does that mean? It bothers them in the way that this certainty has led people to do certain things. Examples might be like the Salem witch trials, the Crusades, or terrorism. They speak to this fear both through the words of Reed and by his own actions. Reed verbalizes his disdain for religious people who have acted on their own certainty of the truth, but in the same breath, he too searches for that ultimate certainty. He wants to find the ultimate religion in which he believes is absolute control. And then he does horrific things based on his own religious views. In contrast to him, I would say Paxton, more than Barnes, exemplifies the kind of attitude that Beck and Woods want to praise here. Paxton, it is revealed at the end, holds to her faith more out of a humanitarian reason than certainty. Like how she says praying for someone else is beautiful even if it doesn't work. Though that can be a Christ-like quality, praying for someone else, the key feature of true prayer is the communion with God, with a God you believe is there and you can commune with. You have to be seeking God in prayer, not just a higher moral good. She also mentions her desire to come back as the butterfly, a belief of the afterlife not aligned with her religion's theology, but shows her to have the desire to comfort those she loves. And though we did say she admits to not actually disbelieving, she does allow herself to pick the disbelief door. Paxton is more comfortable playing around with the uncertainty than Barnes is. I think this is a good way of safeguarding these characters from becoming two-dimensional. At the beginning of the film, we size up Paxton and Barnes to be certain types, with Paxton being the run-of-the-mill good Mormon girl and Barnes being the one with more of an edge. But it is revealed throughout the film that Barnes is much more certain in the belief of her Mormon faith as it is written, like on the gold tablets. She doesn't bend much or at all when defending her faith to Reed. She even says, "Let us let God decide our fate," as they descend into the dungeon basement. In this way, Barnes has more of a certainty to her beliefs in faith, which is one of the reasons Reed nixes her. But ironically, it's Paxton's willingness to not be so certain that gets her farther into survival. So, Beck and Woods are rewarding Paxton for behaving in the way they see is the best way to be, with a willingness to be uncertain about ultimate beliefs. She makes it to the end, she comes out with a moral high ground, and yet her ending is still left with question because the ultimate goal of the film is to never give you certainty in any belief, other than being a good moral human. So this is what I meant by Paxton. She is technically the final girl. She makes it to the end, but she doesn't fully survive her film, which I think other final girls that has happened to them as well. But I would consider Paxton technically a final girl. But, and this is a big but, there is deep irony here in everything I just said about Paxton and her dipping into the uncertainty and Reed being certain and all those things and how the film ends. Because Beck and Woods, in a way, are being like Mr. Reed. A film is a piece of craftsmanship, and every decision made within a film is intentional to tell a story. While I was reading this Fangoria article, I saw Beck and Woods mention how the writing process feels like it's sometimes outside of the writer's control, that the characters or the story tell you how things really should go. I will say, as someone who has written stories in multiple forms, I understand what they mean. Writing does, in fact, feel often like you as the writer are a conduit for a story. But I also know that there is, in fact, much crafting that goes into storytelling, and especially filmmaking. Manipulations made by the craftsman to achieve a final product. A film even more so on that. Like I said, every detail is made for the sake of the story, from the costumes to the sets to the specific ways characters might even speak a word. Filmmaking is all about the details. It all comes together to form a reality for us, the viewer, to observe and to experience, and then take away meaning from. Like the Kuleshov effect, we as humans, especially engaging with story, project and garner meaning onto and out of that which we are engaging with. And filmmakers understand that, and they make decisions in their filming to elicit responses that they want from the viewer out of that understanding of how that works. That is why they have test audiences to see if things land successfully. So, the way this film plays out, from the decisions the characters make, to the beliefs each one brings to the table, to the arguments they argue, to who dies and who survives, and why that is so, those are all the decisions made by the filmmakers. They are presenting a version of reality that solely exists in this bubble of the film that they have complete control over. Just like Reed exercises total control over his captive, literally captive audience and places them in a controlled environment that he constructed to prove his point to them, the filmmakers do that with us. We see that in the film that is self-defeating. Reed makes his own reality within his labyrinth and then tries to sell that reality to Paxton and Barnes as true, but we can see through it as the viewer looking in. But can you see it while looking at the film, not just through it? I'm not saying they did something wrong by presenting their thoughts about certainty and belief this way. I'm just bringing attention to the method. I'm not saying it's wrong to make a film like this. Films, by the very nature of their beast, are exactly that. They're about ultimate control and constructing a story. But it's okay for films like this to exist as long as we are aware of what the film is actually doing, which is just presenting a point of view through story. It is meant to get you thinking and asking questions about the things Beck and Woods want you to think about, namely certainty and religious beliefs and how religion is related to control. They said that ultimately that was their goal, and so I would say they succeeded in that. We're here talking about it, so. Okay, moving on. The cult aspect. How it's not just about religion for Mr. Reed. Everyone loves a YouTube video about cults, right? Hopefully this will get the algorithm moving. There is another layer here that is not really mentioned in the discussion of the film online. I feel like it's not focused on as much as like the religious aspect. That is cults and what they are and how they apply to Mr. Reed. Like, it's very obvious to me that he was inspired by certain cult leaders. So the directors actually do acknowledge that they did base Mr. Reed on some cult leaders, just like I said. Like I saw that while I was watching. I was surprised more people didn't talk about it, which I'm glad they do acknowledge it, because if they didn't, then I would be like, you really wrote a character that is not a trustworthy orator or debater about what you want him to debate. So if they were like, oh yeah, he's not supposed to be a cult leader, then I'd be like, oh, you really failed at like him being the representative of like this person who's like questioning religious doctrine, because he's obviously motivated by things other than trying to find the truth. Like, we've established that very well now at this point. So the question is, going back to this part, why young women specifically? Why does Mr. Reed only victimize young women? Once we start to answer this question, a lot gets revealed and we start to get into the whole realm of sex cults. But believe me, cults of all size, shapes, flavors, they all have things in common, and we're going to go over that. But we're going to kind of land here for a minute because that's where the film lands. I'm going to go over cults and cult tactics, how they're used in the film, and how that ties back to the main themes of religious certainty and control. So, what is a cult? A cult is a group centered around a charismatic leader or an unorthodox belief system, and often employs manipulation, isolation, and control tactics, unlike mainstream religions, which typically have established doctrines, institutional accountability, and broader social integration. Cults typically are built around a person or persons, a charismatic leader. Think Jim Jones or Keith Raniere, both people that Beck and Woods claimed helped inspire the character of Mr. Reed. These leaders claim to have something special that you should want. That could be connection to God, divine revelation, or just like great life skills, which I'm pretty sure was what the NXIVM thing was. It wasn't technically a religious cult. It was just like Raniere being like a self-help guru that went like way too far. But basically, those charismatic leaders are the center. Technically, the center can be the beliefs themselves, but this is very rare for that to happen. The thing that the leader has that is the initial draw of the cult are the extreme beliefs. Usually it's apocalyptic or secret or exclusive in nature. One of the biggest red flags of a cult is the use of isolation and control tactics to keep power over their members. And I mean power, literal. This can include forced manual labor, making members stay awake for hours, barely giving them food or water, and almost always includes forcing the members to cut ties with friends and family who are also not in the cult. This control is daily and all-encompassing, usually leading to people living together in like a compound or even in their own town, like Jonestown. The next big red flag is exploitation, and this typically comes in two forms: financially and sexually, often together, or just at the same time in the same cult. Almost all cults involve members giving money in some form to the charismatic leader. And very often the charismatic leader is also taking advantage of members sexually. These could be just women, like we see in the film, but it can be anyone within the cult. The last symptom here of a cult is high commitment by its members. I will say in Heretic, this part can be disputed. The women in Reed's cult are not committed willingly. At least we are not led to believe they are. For one, he has to keep them in cages, meaning that if they weren't in cages, they would try to leave. That's not, committed willingly in my book. We also have one of the prophets go off book and try to warn Paxton and Barnes of Reed's manipulation. All of this goes against Reed's point that he makes when he says, they are where they've chosen to be, and why do you let me have all this control? It's obvious that this point of his has no real ground because he's literally forcing these women to submit. But in all other ways, Reed is running a cult and not a religion. In that scene I'm talking about where Reed comes up to Paxton right before she stabs him, he starts telling her that her choices have been pre-made for her and she has been led here by the powers over her. His body language reads kind of as sexual. He is standing behind her, over her, gently touching her hair and leaning into her ear and whispering, all tactics to make her feel vulnerable to him in both an authoritarian way, but also in a physical way. I've mentioned this before, but this is a clear moment where we see Reed be that charismatic cult leader. He is telling Paxton in this very soothing, yet at the same time threatening way, that she isn't in control, but that he can help her find the truth, that she is destined to be here, that giving him control is absolute, and that she never really even had any power or agency to begin with, all while taking a posture behind her that reads as sexually predatory. Also, this goes back into what I said about Hugh Grant kind of bringing in his prior experience of being a leading man in romantic films and like twisting it to use it in this way and how effective it is, and using it in this insidious way of bringing in, you know, this body language and this way of talking and this way of being very sweet and intimate and having it be threatening through context, but also he does add like a slight edge of threatening, like predatoriness there. And it works very well. I can see why they cast him. I don't know if he auditioned or if they casted him just knowing that what he would deliver would read the way they wanted it to, but it works very well for what I'm talking about with the cult thing. This scene, the whole scene with the women in the cages, proves most blatantly that Reed is not, nor maybe ever was, earnestly seeking the ultimate truth or the one true religion, but instead is completely self-serving. He is, say it with me, a heretic. Why is the movie called Heretic? Does Reed meet the qualifications of a heretic? Let's talk about it. What is a heretic? The definition: a person who holds beliefs or opinions that are in strong contradiction to the official doctrines of a religion. A person who believes in heresies. What is a heresy? A belief that contradicts established doctrine, especially essential or sacred truths. Examples of Christian heresies. We're actually going to go back to the beginning of the video when I was talking about the difference between Mormons and Christians, because it's going to come up right now. Denying the Trinity, denying the bodily resurrection of Christ, denying the divinity of Christ. All these examples, if they are believed to be true, radically change or invalidate the gospel. Remember that. If Christ is not fully God, then his death cannot fully atone for sin. But if he is also not fully man, then that atonement cannot then be applied to all of humanity, applied to us as people, as man. Denying the Trinity, also related to denying Christ's divinity. If Christ is not fully God, then his death cannot fully atone for sin. If the Spirit isn't God, he cannot sanctify believers. Thus, denying the Trinity changes who Christ is and who essentially God is, and the core of Christian theology can no longer exist because of these fundamental changes. Most of these heresies, by the way, were debated and then settled at multiple councils in the early church, which served to canonize and codify Christian beliefs. Meaning, you can only be a Christian if you believe these core doctrines. If you don't believe them, then you are something else. Remember at the beginning of the video when I was talking about the difference between Christians and Mormons and how we believe fundamentally different things, and that just makes us different belief systems? That's what I'm talking about. Mormons believe some Christian heresies. So how does this idea of a religious heretic, because a heretic can be for any religion, they just have to believe something that is not fully kosher with the said religion that they claim to be a part of, relate to our antagonist, Mr. Reed? We have to first name the established doctrine that the film adheres to, so a belief that the film says, yes, that is true. We have already talked about how the film wants us to see uncertainty as a virtue, and wants us to walk away from the movie with the idea that it is better to take all religious ideas with a grain of salt, so to say, and to not live our life by them as if they are certain. Sorry, not sorry. Won't be doing that one. But Mr. Reed is a heretic in this way because he seeks to know the one true religion. Seeking the one true religion and believing that it exists and can be known goes against the uncertainty as virtue core belief of the film. Because if the one true religion is real, then it is something that one can be certain about. Mr. Reed wants certainty. He wants it to be certain that having control gives you power. But, ironically, he is also a heretic when it comes to his own religion, which is ultimate control. As soon as he is faced with death, he seeks help from a higher power. There are no atheists in foxholes, as the old saying goes. He is brutally brought to the conclusion that he was never in real control because he could always die. At the end of the day, he is just a person, like Paxton and Barnes. Here is an even deeper form of his heresy, which is simply violating reality. Reed causes himself to believe that by gaining power over the women he has captured, that this has somehow imbued him with actual power, that he is somehow special or on a higher playing field than others because he has figured out the one true religion, which is having what he feels is religious control. But in reality, in the real doctrine, he is not more special or more powerful than any other human. He has also made a mockery of trust. We talked about how religious people understand that religion is about control, but also with that comes an intimate understanding of trust and then faith. True faith is not blind, it is based on things one already knows to be true. True faith in God comes from trusting him. and God is more than willing to build trust with someone who earnestly seeks him. I am certain that there are other religions who have similar faith systems where the faith they have is based upon established truths that they have already know and believe in. Reed does not build actual trust with his prophets. He uses cult brainwashing techniques plus just regular force. Just regular brutality. There's a part where Reed asks for the hand of one of his prophets to cut her nails, and the prophet then gives him her hand, only to have him cut one of her fingers off. This is a perfect example of how Reed abuses faith. He makes his prophets or followers feel like they have no choice within the matter, and so they submit to him, and he calls that submission faith. But that is not true faith, and it most certainly is not the type of faith that God desires from people. Though I will concede that there are churches out there who do teach this and end up hurting many people through teaching badly on what it means to have a true faithful relationship with God. But the point is, Reed believes and lives out a heresy when it comes to faith. He believes that people are always blindly faithful and that forced compliance is the same as trust. Both are not true, and Reed acting on them with certainty that they are true makes him a heretic. Okay, we are so close, guys. We're so close to the end. How I interpret the ending. This is just a fun thing I decided to throw in there because that's what everyone wants to talk about with this movie. What does the ending mean? So let's talk about it. What really happened at the end? I think that the filmmakers want that to never be fully answered. I don't think there is an actual real answer here, but I'll throw my 2 cents in for fun. Disclaimer, this is not what I actually believe happens when you die. I am just analyzing a fictional movie. Okay, I think that Paxton and Reed died together in the dungeon while Paxton was praying for them. So when Reed lays his head on her shoulder, I think they die in that position together. I don't think she actually made it outside, as evidenced by the obvious cut-in we get of her phone still not getting service. I think that was intentional. I think that Paxton has some type of spiritual journey after she dies, like a transportation of her soul, a transference of realities, and her getting out and leaving is the film's interpretation of that journey. Important to note, Reed is not with her, meaning he went somewhere else. I think Paxton is confused as to what is exactly happening because she is still coming to terms or trying to make sense of her passing over. This aligns with the different interpretations that the film gives about what happens directly after death. If Paxton is temporarily in limbo, then it would make sense that she is confused and her brain, which might be semi-alive, is trying to make sense of the spiritual reality that is happening. So the butterfly in her hand could be Paxton's brain processing that she is currently dying and giving herself a sign that she is about to enter the afterlife. It could also be fully spiritual, a sign from God to clue Paxton in to where she really is and what's really happening. The miracle of Barnes raising from the dead to help Paxton one last time could be Barnes' spirit simply coming back as a guide to help Paxton cross over safely, because Reed is definitely not going with her. And so Barnes helps to separate him from Paxton, giving her friend safe passage to the place Barnes herself is already at. The look of confusion on Paxton's face at the end is simply Paxton trying to figure out where she really is and what will happen next. So it's very much the third one. I think it was the third one that I mentioned when we went over the fan theories. It's very much where I land. We did it. We're done. We got to the end. It's done. 3 days of filming and sweating in the heat in my studio under the light. It's done. My final thoughts. I enjoyed this film. I did. I liked the movie. It did what it set out to do, which was to get people to honestly talk about the nature of religion and belief. I'm here right now doing that. So Heretic does not want to tell you if your religious beliefs are wrong, but it won't tell you if they're right either. The point of Heretic is to bring into question the certainty people have about their religious beliefs while presupposing that no one can be truly certain about religious beliefs. And then the film defends that idea, that presupposition, as something that is good, that no one can be certain about religious beliefs. I don't buy that entirely. Obviously, I'm still a Christian that believes Christianity is the ultimate truth. I know that there are things that are not fully revealed to us and that it would be unwise to speculate on those things that are unrevealed and then treat those speculations as revelation or as certain. But we do have revelation that I hold to be certain and true, and I will continue to live my life by them. My faith is not a blind one. I am not afraid to ask good questions nor to seek good answers to those questions. So, Heretic lands in the middle for me on the scale of truth. It brings up legitimate criticisms and the horrors of religion that is misused and used for abuse of power and used to hurt people, but it does not accurately represent or understand true faith. We're here. We did it. We got to the end. This is the longest video I've ever filmed. Like I said in the last video, I'm still trying to get my sea legs on being in front of the camera and talking. I'm still trying to figure out the setup like, what is the best setup for me? I just found out that maybe the best thing for me is just to read my script that I worked so hard on before. There was a fly, sorry. Yeah, I think just reading what I wrote is going to be the best thing for me personally. And so I'm like, me looking this way, having this here and the lighting, I'm like, I think this is the best setup, and the microphone here, which works for me as the setup for filming. It's easy to set up and keep it and keep coming back to film if I need to. But like I said, I'm still working out all of the kinks, all of the mishaps. I'm still figuring it all out. I have no idea how long this video is going to be. I have filmed so much. And a lot of it's me like, I'm going to reread that. I'm going to say this again. I'm going to do this again because I don't like that. So once I edited it, it might be like an hour and a half long, but it might actually end up being like 4 hours. Like I just said in the beginning, I'm not Novum. I'm not doing a 5-hour video. And then here I am. Maybe. I'm Hannah. This is Metamorphic Side Productions. This is the Horror, Coffee, and Jesus series, I think. I can't remember exactly what title I slapped on this. This is the second video in that series, and what a doozy. I kind of picked a banger for this one. I will say Heretic was kind of perfectly fit into what I wanted to do. So with that said, here's some options for the next one. By the way, I will not put a release date out for any of these videos. Once I pick one to do, it will come out when it comes out. Because this was crazy. I'm really hoping I don't have to refilm it for any reason. And I'm hoping that it does land where it needs to land on the YouTube algorithm, praying for that. Other movies that I think will fit really well into what I'm doing here. There's this film on Netflix called The Ritual, I think. A lot of people say it's like one of the scariest films they've ever seen. I've seen some videos about that movie, and there's a couple aspects of it that I'm like, ooh, I could really dive into that. It has some really interesting things there. And so I wanted to put that up on the board here. I think I will do that movie eventually. It could be the next one. I don't know. There were some suggestions in the comments of the Hereditary video of films to do next. One of them was the latest remake of Nosferatu, which I have not seen, but I wanted to see. I also heard that movie is crazy. But I'm a huge vampire fiction fan, so I would definitely do that. Another one that I know I could talk about and really dive into, which is another A24 film. I've done 2 already. I kind of want to break out of the A24 mold, but it's another Ari Aster movie, is Midsommar. I've never fully watched Midsommar, but it is about cults. I went into cults deeply here, and then we would go even more of a deep dive, and also going into the idea of that film brainwashing you. There's like a fan theory that it's using cult tactics on you as it's playing, which is pretty cool. So Midsommar is also an idea. So that's 3 ideas there, 3 movies that I could do next, which would be Nosferatu, The Ritual, I think is what that movie's called, and then Midsommar. And so I don't know. I'll put a poll out somewhere. I can look at the survey I put out plus what the comments say, and whatever wins, that'll be the next one I do. But I think The Ritual I will also put on the back burner because I am going to do that movie eventually. I just don't know if it's going to be the next one because I know that movie is going to be, I'm going to be back in here right where I'm at, working real hard, making possibly a 5-hour video, sweating again under the lights. And I want to take a break from that. Midsommar and Nosferatu, now they might also be like that too, but I feel like maybe they wouldn't take as much time to break down. Maybe not Midsommar. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. I need to get off of the stool. I need to shut the camera down, put the mic away. I'm Hannah. This is Metamorphic Side Productions. I do Christian film analysis, and I'm a Christian filmmaker. If you would like to become a supporter of mine, that would be wonderful because this is ministry. So I don't do the YouTube partnership program, and I don't do ad revenue, and I don't do sponsorships. I'm just directly supported by you guys. So if you would like to be a supporter of mine, I have a Giving Fuel page that I link down in every single video that's down there. I'm trying to get to $3,000 monthly supported. That would be me fully supported. And also, I would love if we could get there, I could start hiring voice actors. There's a fly. I can start hiring voice actors for my stop motion animated film that I'm making, The Perfect Mirror, which is the next big step in getting that to completion. So yeah, that's where I'm at. That's me. God bless. Love you guys. Bye.